Thank you. We have a quorum. There's no legislation, so we don't need a quorum. Could you please note excused absences for council members Bishop and Davis, and I believe Councilman Starr is going to be coming late. He had a ribbon cutting, and I'm sure others will trickle in as well. This is our fourth of four previously scheduled meetings pertaining to the proposed closure of Burke Airport. Up to date, we have discussed just general site conditions. We've talked about the financial aspects of Burke as it operates currently. We discussed 2 weeks ago the procedures through which one would close an airport. And today, what was originally planned had been sort of an abstract, maybe conversation about the Northeast Ohio real estate market and how it would align with this property. Since then, Mayor Bibb's administration has come forth with a concept, a fit. I want to be very clear that what we're going to be talking about today is not a definitive plan. Again, there is no legislation before this body pertaining to the closure of the airport. However, since the administration has gone through the effort of demonstrating at a high level what the site could accommodate, what the economics of it would be, I think it would be more useful for us to talk about that rather than to talk about things more abstract than that presentation. So with that, I'll invite the administration and the North Coast Waterfront Authority forward as I turn it over to you. If there's anyone in the audience who is interested in public comment, to the left of the clerk, there is a sign-up sheet at the end of the presentation and all of the questions from council. We'll be able to have public comment where you can come forward and have 3 minutes to address the body. And with that, if Deputy Chief Trevisano, good morning.
Good
If you could
morning.
introduce your side, especially since there's a new introduction to be made.
Of course. Jessica Trevisano, Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief Strategy Officer. I'll let my team, who's at the table with me, introduce themselves.
Tom McNair, Chief of Integrated Development.
Scott Skinner, Executive Director of the North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation.
And my name is Jason Russell. I'm the VP of Real Estate and Development for the North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation, focused on planning and development of our North Coast.
Good, welcome.
Thank you.
And with that, I will turn it over to you for what I'm sure is going to be an interesting presentation for all. Go ahead.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. We are here to talk about redevelopment of Burke Lakefront Airport. We're going to start with an overview, meeting purpose, give you a brief update on the Lakefront Stadium site. We're here to talk about Burke, but they are proximate, and I know there's questions about how those two sites relate to one another. We're going to talk about the redevelopment context, about Cleveland's real estate market overall. We're going to talk about principles and constraints related to redevelopment of Burke, concepts and uses. We're going to talk a bit about the air show, economic input, community input, and then anticipated next steps. We've got a lengthy presentation for you, so thanks for giving us the time. So overall, as it relates to redeveloping Burke Lakefront Airport, a recreation-focused concept at Burke Lakefront Airport would require minimal public funding. It would increase resident access to 450 acres of lakefront considerably, and it would generate 5 times more direct tax revenue to the city every year than Burke Lakefront Airport currently generates. I'll pause just to maybe reemphasize in previous meetings, we've really focused on the direct tax impact of the airport and that land. So this isn't talking about like heads and beds and all of the ancillary tax benefits. This is truly just like income, property, parking tax, direct tax benefits from the site to the city. The redevelopment concept that we'll show you today is relatively low-hanging fruit and would generate 5 times more direct economic impact, direct tax revenue to the city. We'll talk about today how redeveloping Burke will not prevent an air show from operating in Cleveland. Low-density, recreation-focused development does not prevent higher-density development from occurring in the future. When we're thinking about a choice like this, we're thinking about it in the context of, decades and centuries, not in just, what can we do in the next year or two. And that Burke Lakefront Airport is a major constraint on the site that prevents development on 450 acres of publicly controlled land. This meeting purpose, I've said it at each of the 3, and I'm going to end with it as well, is to provide us, Cleveland City Council and the public with a clear, fact-based understanding of the legal, financial, operational, and market realities associated with Burke Lakefront Airport, so that any future decision regarding its closure or continued operation is informed, transparent, fiscally responsible, and aligned with the long-term interests of Cleveland taxpayers. In our previous meetings, we'll kind of call back to all of them in today, but just to summarize, on January 21st, we talked about the historical, legal, operational, and other regulatory factors related to Burke. At that meeting, we talked about how significant due diligence exists on the site and that there are relatively few unknowns of the site. We've talked about how low-density development does not require unusually high costs for environmental remediation, geotechnical work, or infrastructure, and that the land at Burke Lakefront Airport is similar to land on the lakefront that we see today. You know, we've built a stadium, a rock hall, a science center, restaurants, housing, all on land that is almost identical to what Burke Lakefront Airport is. We've also built an airport on the airport land. On February 4th, we talked about Burke and the budget. At that meeting, we talked about how Burke has operated at a loss of about $900,000 annually over a 20-year average. That loss was $1.7 million in 2025. We also talked about how Cleveland Hopkins signatory airlines, so you know, your Deltas, your United, your JetBlues, are the ones who bear that operational loss. They're the ones who subsidize the costs at Burke. And that Burke brings in just around $500,000 in direct tax revenue. That's about about $1,000 per acre.
I just so that everyone has a little bit of context on how low that is, we had a study done for us about a year or so ago by a group called Urban 3 that started to look at TIFs and various property values throughout the city. Just for context, the Steelyard Commons Walmart produces about $700,000 an acre in taxable value. A single-family home on East 71st Street provides about $2.3 million, if you looked at it on an acreage basis, in taxable value. The Five Points Cafe in Chairman Sykes' ward produces about $4.1 million in taxable value per acre. When you start to look at downtown, and I think, look, I say this all the time, but everyone should get used to hearing things like this. Downtown represents 2.37% of our land area. It provides about 35 to 40% of our income taxes in the city of Cleveland, which funds our neighborhoods. It's about 8.5 times greater in terms of like taxable value than the land it sits on. The Artisan Apartments downtown, $49.5 million of taxable value per acre. Most expensive piece of real estate in all of Cleveland, Key Tower, produces $156 million of taxable value per acre. So you think about those numbers and you look at the fact that we are getting roughly $1,000 an acre on that, and I want everyone in here to remember, as we pass the shore to quarter shore tax district, right, like a portion of Burke is within that, right? So as we increase taxable value up there, we are actually supporting this very important piece of legislation that is enabling us to reach our waterfronts.
Last, when we were just here on April 1st, we talked about the process for closing Burke Lakefront Airport. We talked about the 3 paths that we can run and are running in parallel. One is waiting until 2039. That's when the grant obligations from the FAA end. Another is the getting approval from the FAA through the formal sort of net benefit to aviation analysis. And the last is congressional authorization. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott to talk about, or to Jason, thank you, to talk about the downtown Lakefront Stadium site.
Yes, so we have selected a new master planner for the stadium site now that the decision has been made to remove the stadium. One thing I want to make very clear is that the community engagement that we've gotten over the last several years is something that we are going to safeguard and uphold, especially around those core tenets around public access and economic impact. Those are the 2 things we really heard strongly from the community. We want to make sure that as we go through the site planning process, that is honored and respected. And we will have community engagement later this summer around those initial site plan designs. Additionally, the North Coast Yard will continue this year in 2026 with actually some improvements that will continue to activate the North Coast all summer long. And the North Coast Connector Project, which is the realignment of the Shoreway and the land bridge, the construction is likely to break ground in Q4 of 2027.
So a little bit of context, again, as we think about downtown and where all this sits, again, I just stressed earlier, I'm going to repeat those numbers. 2.37% of the geographic area of the city of Cleveland is our downtown. It's 35 to 40% of our income tax value, right? 175 to $200 million. It's outweighed 8.5 times in terms of property tax value throughout the city of Cleveland, right? Like downtown is the engine that actually funds our neighborhoods, right? And so Cleveland's downtown, this is not unique to Cleveland, right? Like American cities all over, we're seeing a lot of challenges surrounding commercial real estate. This impacts our downtown. Probably the best example I can give you of that is 200 Public Square, right? So one of our trophy Class A buildings right on Public Square, that building traded in 2018 for $187 million. It was then purchased in 2024 for $54 million, right? And so a large portion of what we have designed our shore to core to shore strategy is how do we embrace our single greatest natural asset in our waterfronts, right? Like we are a 2 waterfront city. I say this all the time. We're the waterfront city that can barely see and does not touch the water, and we are changing that. And we are changing that by putting in place a program like Shore to Core to Shore, which is leveraging the dollars that come in to go back and make those waterfront connections. And you can see it all over this map. From $130 million is being invested in Irishtown Bend Park, which is going to be the first waterfront park in America that is directly connected to public housing, bringing back Scranton Peninsula to life, where we have over 1,000 new people moving in there today. $400 million generated by Shore to Core to Shore that is going into our Cuyahoga Riverfront that is allowing Bedrock to do things like the $250 million new Cleveland Clinic Global Health Center that the Cavs are going to be playing in, a new amphitheater, development across our riverfront. If you look down to our lakefront, the $150+ million that has been leveraged of federal grants is going in that is allowing us to make those connections, right? All of this is being done to bolster and reinvigorate our downtown because we cannot take it for granted. Right, so, and one of the things that we've also heard a lot about around here, and we've had a lot of commentary coming in on Burke Lakefront Airport with all the different things that you could do, and why don't we make this more industrial lands? This is the reminder that I showed up here in the fall of 2023, and we had a whopping 1 site in the city of Cleveland that was 10+ acres and shovel ready, 1. Right? And so we didn't even have the ability, when we think about like onshoring and jobs and traded sector, we did not have the ability to bring those types of companies here. That is why we worked with you to invest $50 million in the Site Readiness for Good Jobs Fund, which is now being leveraged by another $50 million by the Cleveland Foundation, and we are starting to create sites across the city. Site Readiness Fund has now over 400 acres of land under control that is in the process of being remediated and prepared for job creation. Up and down the Opportunity Corridor, again, when I first got here, those were not sites. Those were a collection of old single-family home parcels, streets that need to be vacated. I think you've seen a lot of those coming to the table as we turn those into job-ready sites. There's a lot of activity that is happening behind the door there that is going to be coming to fruition. We're very excited about that. And then just some broad waterfront context I think that we all want to think about. I think this slide does a great job of showing us just how large Burke Lakefront Airport is, right? 450 acres, just a little context, that is over half the size of downtown Cleveland. If you want to think about it more in terms of our shoreline, if you go from the Port Authority all the way to Gordon Square Park, that's about 4.5 miles of coastline. Burke Lakefront Airport is 2 miles of that. Right? And so, you think about some of the challenges that we were talking about with downtown. We don't have, we've seen a lot of shrinking office footprint, but which, by the way, is not new, right? Before I got into the civic sector, I spent about 10 years in office design development. Shrinking office footprint is nothing new. The pandemic certainly put the gasoline on the fire, so to speak, on that regard. And so as you're looking at those office spaces now, it's like highly amenitized office spaces. Used to be Wins, now it's highly amenitized office spaces in highly amenitized places. And that is what Shore to Core to Shore is all about in bolstering that type of activity. But also, I think when you think about the residential market, we talked about some of the work that's gone on in Scranton Peninsula. We're talking about some of the things that are going on from a mixed-use perspective along our riverfront, around the lakefront and North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation. That is things that are happening over the course of decades, right, in an absorption standpoint. We don't have the market right now to take 450 acres of land and just fill it with mixed-use development. We don't have the ability to just fill 450 acres of land of office. And so that has driven a large part of the redevelopment strategy that we are comprehending here. And I also want to say, too, one of the things that is fascinating to me, so if you see the big green arrow, the north-south one, that is East 9th Street. I always like to joke, if there's 2.6 million people in our region, about 2 million of those people think that that is the only north-south connection in the entirety of the city of Cleveland. That far right green arrow that's pointing downward, that is where a new connection will be made via the Shoreway. At roughly 17th and 18th, which we envision as reconnecting as kind of one-way pairs that go up and down new north-south connection. When you have Burke Lakefront Airport as more of a destination moving on there, that activates an entire quadrant of our downtown that is largely surface parking lots, quasi-vacant land, semi-industrial type structures that have the ability to develop over the course of time and be activated. So there's a lot of connection opportunities within here. And then lastly on this point for me, so I got here again fall of 2023, and there were a lot of conversations about Burke, and so we actually engaged this study from ESI to better understand Burke and a variety of different possibilities. One of that, and I know this has been mentioned a lot, was what would reinvesting in Burke Lakefront Airport look like? That was looked at. We looked at what is the actual economic impact of Burke Lakefront Airport today. But then we just, on a very broad level, what are different types of opportunities from a development perspective and what type of impact does that have? We explored everything from a maximum development scenario, right? And I think that was modeled at 1,200 residential units, 100,000 square feet of retail, 100 key hotel room. And how does that impact it? I think as Chairman Slife has noted before, that would require a lot of infrastructure. The city would have to provide to enable that type of development to occur. And then we started modeling out what does minimal development look like. And that was actually the first time that we introduced that concept of what youth sports may look at here. There was a lot of information that we were starting to see about how those types of facilities drive visitors and bring traffic into places, and so we wanted to start getting a look at what that might entail. I think important to note that did not get detailed into that, but looked at some base costs of what that could be and roughly like what type of tourism it could generate and indirect impact. And then, we looked at some hybrid scenarios too with modeling more dense development up towards East 9th Street where there's the infrastructure for it.
So taking into context everything that Tom just went through, as we're looking at future use for Burke Lakefront Airport, we need to look at both site constraints that Jessica outlined a little bit earlier, as well as come up with a set of guiding principles for how we should think about what that land use should even be. So in terms of constraints, like Jessica mentioned, there's relatively few unknowns from a development perspective. When you're developing real estate, it's really heavy industry or prior uses that you don't know about that cause risk and cause increased potential cost. That is not the case here. That low-density development does not require unusually high costs. Developing this site from a cost perspective should be fairly similar to developing any site in Northeast Ohio, and that the land already supports development. Jessica mentioned the other uses that are already on fill. And finally, that phasing can allow for more development over time. 450 acres is a lot of land. Not all of that is going to be built up at once. And as we're thinking about places that can be green spaces, parking, low-density development now, when we have a market, if we have a market in the future to support more dense development, it doesn't forbid us from doing that. As we're thinking about principles for the site, and we're going to go through some of the fit studies that I'm sure a lot of you have seen already in just a few minutes, we're really looking at 3 guiding principles for how to think about this land and this opportunity. The first is improving public access. Again, we're going to say it over and over again, 450 acres, 2 miles of shoreline. As Tom mentioned, between East 55th Street Marina and Edgewater Park, there's 6 miles of shoreline. Less than 25% of that is publicly accessible. By transforming Burke into something that is publicly accessible, you're going to be well over having 50% of that land open to the public. Second, driving economic impact by attracting visitors to downtown Cleveland. Tom talked about $1 per acre of direct tax revenue coming in for Burke. That is a significantly insufficient amount of direct tax revenue for what that land mass is. We should be leveraging this publicly owned asset. 450 acres of publicly controlled land on a waterfront in a downtown does not exist elsewhere in North America, and we should be leveraging it to drive more economic impact, both through direct tax revenue to the city, as well as bringing visitors into the city to stay in hotels, to go shopping, to go to restaurants. And then third, a financially viable model. We don't want to be in a place where Burke Lakefront Airport closes, and then it's heavily reliant on government subsidies or philanthropy to redevelop. We are looking at uses that are privately financed, but that can also increase amount of public access to the waterfront and to this land. So those are the three sort of guiding principles that we're looking at as we talk about Burke. So we assembled a small cohort and coalition to look at and analyze potential uses for the future Burke Lakefront Airport through those three guiding principles. That coalition is the city, county, North Coast Development Corporation, Metro Parks, the Port, Destination Cleveland, Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, Black Environmental Leaders Association, and Greater Cleveland Partnership. So this group came together to identify what those three guiding principles are going to be, and then look at land use through that lens. We assembled 2 hypothetical fit studies as well as an economic impact analysis of those fit studies. Councilman Slife mentioned earlier, but I do want to reiterate, these are not master plans. These are not formal plans of what we are going to build that are going to be adopted. These are really meant to inform us on whether or not we should pursue closing Burke, whether or not there are possible redevelopment opportunities that hit those 3 criteria, and I think they do that.
I'm just going to say that for, I think, a third time because I think it's really important, which is these conceptual fit studies are meant to be a piece of information to inform whether folks support the idea of closure. These aren't what is necessarily going to be built. This is pretty low-hanging fruit that does not require a lot of public infrastructure money. It doesn't require a lot from the public to get there, what we're going to show you today. And so when we're thinking about, and I think you all have asked us this question, if Burke was to close, what is going to go there? We don't know what is going to go there, but this is some options of what could go there. And what we'll talk about and what we'll kind of get to at the end is any of these options is going to have more direct tax revenue to the city of Cleveland than what Burke Lakefront Airport currently does. They're all going to increase public access dramatically. They're all going to help in their efforts to transform the Cleveland into a waterfront city. So just want to really emphasize that, again, if there was, anything that's going to be built would be based on a substantial planning process. This is meant to help inform decisions around whether you support closing Burke or not.
It's also meant to facilitate a conversation like this one and a broader one with the community. We'll talk about this later as well. We have a community survey that's received over 5,800 responses. And in the first sort of batch of responses, what we actually heard a lot of was, I can't even fathom what you would put there because it's too big. So this has actually helped us as we've actually bifurcated responses before these images were released and responses after these images were released, so folks can evaluate them and have some ideas of what could go on Burke, and they could actually look at a plan and see what is possible. So I'm going to go through these uses for these 2 fit studies sort of west to east briefly, and then Jason can dive into further detail about them as well. So starting on the west with that yellow band you see, that is meant to be a marina or a waterfront boardwalk. We've seen these be enormously successful drivers of economic impact and drivers of public access in other cities across the country. Toronto, Chicago, Detroit, all have used these to drive more business down there. On that marina, we also look at boat slips as well as some low-density development. Think like what you see on Voinovich. So restaurant opportunities, small business opportunities, places for folks to congregate on the water. The northern part of that yellow band, you see a sort of brown area. That is meant to be amenitized RV camping facilities. This is a use that I knew nothing about a couple months ago, but have done a lot of research into that. Jason will talk about this more, but these are also enormous drivers of tourism that drive significant direct revenue to cities. Again, a use that is privately financed and that does not necessarily have to come from public subsidy. What you see is on a majority of this plan is a competitive youth sports facility. So these are enormous drivers of economic impact and of visitors to areas all over the country. The Greater Cleveland Sports Commission estimates that anywhere from 400 to 600 families could be coming to Cleveland almost every weekend to use facilities like this. And the families that need to stay in hotels, need to go to restaurants, need activities. From a competitive market perspective, you don't see these sort of uses in urban areas because there's never sufficient land, and we don't lack for that here. These are normally in suburban areas or even rural areas, and we think from a competitive advantage perspective, perspective, families that are coming in for youth sports competitions are going to have a much stronger desire to come to downtown Cleveland, where there's things to do in the 5 hours you have between a soccer game, as opposed to another location. You see a orange field house. It looks small relative to the rest of the site, but that is a 7-acre building that could contain volleyball courts, hockey, basketball, all sorts of indoor uses, as well as a variety of outdoor fields. Because this is publicly owned land, we've also seen this model be successful in other markets where, while competitive youth sports tournaments take place solely on the weekends, that also gives us an opportunity to open it up to the general public for free use as a rec center during the week when there are not actual tournaments there. So again, a privately financed use, because these are profitable businesses, that can provide additional public access to the site. Within this network, you see about 10 miles of walking trails or biking trails that can connect directly into the county trail on North Marginal that's under construction right now. Again, giving folks things to do between games at sports facilities or just places to bike along the water. Moving further east, you see about a 180-acre public park. This was put together in consultation with Cleveland Metro Parks as something that we think is viable, is possible, and would add significant public space to downtown Cleveland, significant green public space to downtown Cleveland. And then the final item you see is that purple box at the bottom right corner. That is meant to be a vertiport that can serve Cleveland Clinic, other sort of private uses. Lots of companies around here around the area have a need for a helicopter pad, but not necessarily a full runway. So we can still fulfill a lot of the traffic that goes on Burke right now. In sort of the Burke annual users, helicopters are a large portion of that, while only taking up 2 to 3 acres for a vertiport, as opposed to all 450 acres for an airport. The next version you see is the very similar plan, but rather than a public park, this is an 18-hole public golf course. When we think about, again, those key principles and those of economic impact, financeability, and public space, what these two plans are meant to do are sort of pull on different levers of those principles. So while this version of a plan has less sort of open public space, it is even a public golf course like this is a use that is generally privately financed through traditional debt and traditional equity. I would add in, Metro Parks has a number of these across the area. During winter, they're used for winter recreation, think cross-country skiing or other uses like that as well.
I would only add, I know the port was here for our very first meeting. Both of these plans maintain the confined disposal facilities that the port uses for its dredge and cleaning dredge material for use in other uses. So the CDF9 is still shown in all of these plans.
So as Scott mentioned, one of the concepts is to create a larger waterfront marina for the city of Cleveland and really the region. And we've seen our sister cities across the country on the waterfronts really emphasize that and really take advantage of that waterfront. Toronto, Chicago, Boston, Detroit has added some new pieces. And the important piece is we always talk about accessibility for cars and pedestrians when we build developments, but we live on a Great Lake, and boats is a big part of the culture here. And so if we can get more boats to come to the Central Business District, that drives energy and activity. And you've seen that certainly in Chicago along the Chicago River, but that just brings people from all over the region who have a boat to come and visit and go to a concert or whatnot. And oftentimes that drives room nights as well, and obviously food and beverage. And as Scott mentioned, a big part of that is you could use grants to fund this, and they're also privately financeable as well. So a great opportunity to really bring more people into our Central Business District.
Can I just add in one item there, just to hammer home the point that's in the slide? The Chicago River Promenade drives $27 million in solely concession revenue. So again, thinking about sales tax, using the site to drive sales tax, it has been enormously successful in driving that directly to Chicago.
So the RV park, and similar to what Scott said, I am not an RV person, so as we did research and learning about this, our RV popularity has grown significantly since the pandemic, and surprisingly, the demographic of individuals purchasing RVs has come down significantly as well. It used to be the average age was in the late 50s, now that is in the late 40s as more millennials and Gen Zs use RVs as a different way of recreation. And so these parks, actually most of them are called resorts because they have fitness clubs, pools, clubhouses, and other sports facilities on the site. It really is, if you think about it, it's a hotel without a room, and you bring your room to the facility, and the facility has the amenities in itself. And these are growing mostly in suburban and rural areas. And so the proximity to the central business district allows folks who maybe are coming to the town, again, like I said, for a concert, that don't want to stay in a hotel room, but they can bring their whole family in one vehicle and still have a great experience and stay overnight. And the longer they linger in downtown Cleveland, the more money they will spend within our community. And again, as Scott mentioned, these are infinitely able to be privately financed, and it's really growing as an industry. You can see a $35 billion industry, which an average daily spend of $165 per individual. And so as you think about RVs are traditionally designed to bring, couples and families, that starts to amplify the economic impact. And the number of people who are employed by those RV resorts as well can help increase our job and income tax revenue from the site. So Scott mentioned competitive, competition-ready sports facilities. If there are any folks with young children, they know where you get the travel schedule every year and you find out 6 weekends out of your summer you're going to be traveling somewhere in Indiana or Pennsylvania for a tournament. And for better or for worse, those are typically in more rural areas. And I'll just use the Sandusky example outside of Cedar Point and Spire out in Geauga County. As a family, if you're bringing your entire family to those locations, it's great that your children are playing, but then after the games or between the games, what do you do? And especially if you have one child who's playing and one child who's not playing and just can't sit still, being so close to our central business district allows us to, I'm going to take our daughter to the Great Lakes Science Center while our son plays soccer, or to the Museum of Illusions on Euclid Avenue. And then those folks, instead of staying in some hotel out in the rural areas, now say like, okay, we're going to go to Playhouse Square after the game is over. We're going to eat. We're going to stay in a hotel downtown. It starts to drive those bed nights that we certainly need in our central business district, and drives additional other tax revenue. So just some examples here, and these are examples in more rural areas. So we could think of ours would likely be amplified is in Albertville, Alabama, about a $20 million annual economic impact. And then in Vernon Ford, Iowa, that generates about 1.5 million visitors just at the sports complex, and additional $25 million in economic impact. And again, as Scott mentioned, these are privately financed because of the opportunity that they present. And I think equally as important of all the things I just mentioned is that given the tournaments are typically on weekends, there's a great opportunity to work with the folks who would operate this to provide public access on these high-quality fields for the residents of the city of Cleveland. Something I think we sorely need to make sure our children have great opportunities to grow as athletes in our city.
I just want to add real quick on the youth sports thing, and I want to be very clear about this. Like, this is an economic development play, right? Competitive youth sports is a $65 billion industry today. It is projected to go to a $154 billion industry by 2035. And you can look all over the country, but facilities like this do not exist in major American downtowns. They do not. They are in suburbs, they are in exurbs. Detroit is trying. If you go to look at Ralph Wilson Park, where they're building a new WNBA facility, right next they're starting to build some competitive youth soccer fields, but they can only do a handful of them. Like, I had the opportunity, the reason we kind of slipped this into the ESI study a few years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Janelle Fairman, who's the Economic Development Director for City of Westfield outside of Indianapolis a couple of years ago, where they have the Grand Park Sports Complex. The Grand Park Sports Complex sits on 400 acres of land in suburban Indianapolis. That place generates 2.5 million annual visitors, right? Like, a little bit of context there. Cleveland Browns Stadium, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Great Lakes Science Center, 1.6 million visitors annually, right? It has a $100 million annual spend that goes on there. It is the 16th largest sports venue draw in the country. Like, they're starting to attract things around it that are like, they're building a city out of that sports complex being in the center of it. But again, we don't have to go all the way to Indianapolis. If you just look at what is happening at the Sports Force complex over there, which centers largely on baseball, that place has a $25 million annual impact, economic impact. You may recall the Cleveland Browns had a $31 million annual economic impact. That sits on 50 acres. Right? That's a third of what we're showing on here, which again gets to the context of the size of Burke, right? We would only be showing, right now we're showing a third of the site being used for something like this, and something 1/3 of what we're proposing is generating $25+ million in economic impact and 15,000 room nights a year, right? We talk about like building on our strengths. You have an organization representing the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, Destination Cleveland. You want to talk about some organizations that punch above their weight and the ability to bring events here that are driving things. And I think Jason mentioned, folks and what they do in between games. I've sat at my daughter's AAU basketball games in my minivan eating bologna sandwiches in between games because there's nothing around us. Here you can walk to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You're in town for the weekend, you can stay, you can go to the Cosm up the street, Playhouse Square. Like there are opportunities all around us that are sitting on here. And I also want to tee up and hit on what Scott was saying as it relates to that kind of community benefit that goes in here. I think most of you know in my prior life to this, one of the best things that I was ever a part of, and your former colleague Carrie McCormack was a big part of it too, was the creation of what is now known as Near West Recreation, which started out as a 68-child youth T-ball league in Ohio City, has grown to serve over 1,800 kids, primarily on the city's Near West side. 54% of those kids live below the poverty line, right? And they deserve every single opportunity that the folks living in a place like Lakewood or Shaker Heights deserve in their ability to play sports. You guys want to know what our single biggest challenge with Near West Rec was? It wasn't even raising the roughly $400,000 a year that we had to raise to make sure that those kids living below the poverty line had access to that programming. It was finding court time for basketball in the winter because it's so hard. And that is not just like a city of Cleveland problem. If you look like locally and regionally as we get into this, try finding ice rink time around here for like local youth sports. Like there is a line out the door of people that need these types of facilities during the year that can program this, right? And so, again, if you're asking my opinion, unequivocally this is something that we should be looking at because it doesn't exist anywhere else, and we have the infrastructure in place, I think, to blow it out of the water.
Thanks, Tom. So another piece of the conceptual plans included over 10 miles of walking and biking trails. I think we all are very familiar with the Metro Parks and the tremendous trails they have through Cuyahoga County and frankly beyond. If you go on a Saturday, likely most of the trailhead parking lots are full as people are enjoying the recreation opportunities. And trails in Ohio, $2 in economic value for every dollar spent to create them. So double what the investment is. And then also the Towpath Trail through Scranton Peninsula has driven a lot of private investment. Director McNair mentioned earlier the new 1,000 people who are living on Scranton Peninsula. Those type of investments are driven by the public investments to create access to things that people really want to enjoy. And I also want to hit home, the Metro Parks are great, but you have to drive to go get to most of the Metro Parks, right? And so especially as you think about the east side of Cleveland, having access to great high quality trails on our lakefront is something that is sorely missed, that generations have been fighting for, and it's an opportunity for us to create that here, and uniquely right on the lakefront that has incredible views, and frankly cool in the summertime when it's 90 degrees outside, right? You get a nice lake breeze. And these are things that can be built through grant opportunities, through philanthropy, through working with other folks, again, to avoid the public investment from the city of Cleveland. Public parks, very similar as we talked about with walking trails, but I think the great opportunity here is creating a great public space that can be really defining of our city. We show examples of Millennium Park and Golden Gate Park, both in Chicago and San Francisco, but having that signature park that defines the city of Cleveland, that can amplify and bring individuals to the area that come to the space just to get a picnic by the lake or to play great frisbee or soccer or football, just great open space for people to enjoy both actively and passively, however they choose, but having that in abundance and easily accessible, and those visitors continue to drive economic impact to our central business district. So a golf course, great example here in Chicago of a golf course right on the waterfront. We've seen Michigan and Wisconsin utilize these to great success. Those golf courses bring both regional and national visitors to their location. So it's an opportunity for us to create additional economic impact for the region. Estimate bringing about $20 million in additional annual impact from those visitors to the golf course. And also this has an opportunity to be privately financed. And I think the last piece that Scott also mentioned, but the opportunity to use it differently in the wintertime provides a great opportunity for cross-country skiing, which is difficult to do in the city of Cleveland, but also very popular cross-country skiing. so just skiing across the snowpack. To provide additional, as I mentioned, winter recreation and the idea of potentially creating grade changes within the golf course that could be great sledding hills too for families to enjoy in the wintertime. Lastly, a vertiport. As Scott mentioned, helicopters are a big portion of the operations currently at Berkeley Lakefront Airport. Our healthcare providers, obviously with Metro, UH, and Cleveland Clinic, but also our local TV stations and others use the helicopter port. So this is an opportunity for us to maintain those uses that are critical for the region on site. And again, this is an opportunity to provide that use without investment from the city of Cleveland.
So now we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about the air show. Jessica and I will talk about this together. I can say definitively the air show can continue to operate if Burke closes. There are countless examples nationally of air shows operating from remote locations. The experience is a little bit different than it is currently, but most air shows across the country do operate from remote locations. For the Cleveland Air Show, it's less of a logistics concern and much more of an economics concern of whether or not they can continue to operate. We believe there is still an opportunity to retain a paid visitor experience on the future land use of Burke, resolving that economic issue. I've spoken to 4 other air show producers across the country, and all unanimously and vehemently concur that the Cleveland Air Show can continue to operate without Burke. And we're eager to engage with the folks who run the air show. We've been trying to get some time with them, and we're working to schedule a meeting some point in late May.
This is just an image of sort of a hypothetical viewing area. I'm sure you all have gotten the same feedback that we have from the air show, which is, concerns that the air show cannot go forward in its current state, which I think I just want to maybe give you some context of what that current state is. Our air show is currently like a $2.3 million air show. That's what it costs in revenue that they bring in and what it costs to put on. Other air shows are around $300,000 to $500,000 to put on. And our air show pays for that $2.3 million by charging ticket fees. It's $50 for anybody 11 years old and up to go to the air show. There's cost to park. There's cost to be there. Not saying that that's impossible to do on the site. In fact, we've kind of shown where you could put a ticketed viewing area for premium seats for the air show if this is something that they were interested in. We're interested in talking to them about ways to continue to have the ground exposition, having the planes on site instead of just a remote air show. But our air show is very protective of Burke Lakefront Airport because it's how they generate their revenue to continue operating as their 501c3. So I've heard stories of people who are trying to watch the air show from city-owned parking lots where the air show hires security and tells them that they shouldn't be watching from those parking lots because the air show wants people to go pay for tickets to watch at Burke Lakefront Airport. All to say, I think we're very interested in working with the air show to think about maybe their existing model isn't what's going to work without Burke, but a model for an air show is going to continue to be very possible in the city of Cleveland, even if Burke closes.
So as we wrap up the last couple slides here, I'm going to just briefly give an overview of the economic impact analysis that was conducted on these 2 hypothetical fit studies. I'm going to preface it with saying both the economic impact and the annual tax revenue and the job growth is solely focused on the site of Burke Lakefront Airport and is not inclusive of folks staying in hotels coming to a youth sports competition, is not inclusive of sales tax from folks going to restaurants when they're coming to visit these areas. So this is just the uses that we've outlined here. It's a $600 to $800 million one-time economic impact, $2.5 million in direct annual tax revenue, again, generated solely on the site, and that is a 5x multiplier of what that site generates currently. 3,000 construction jobs to build the images that you've seen as we've gone through these, as well as 170 permanent full-time jobs in the city of Cleveland to operate the uses that we've just went through. And again, that is just on the site. That does not include any jobs created as a result of this outside of the Burke Lakefront Airport site. It in the conclusion, the three sort of last bullet points here, concluding the economic impact analysis were it would result in a significant increase in visitor spending to the city. It would enhance Cleveland's overall competitiveness to attract new businesses and residents, and would likely generate a much greater economic benefit than maintaining current airport operations. Like I mentioned, we've also been asking folks in the community what they think of some of these uses, and I'm just going to go through some high-level information here. NCWDC engaged Land Studio, who's reached out to every one of your offices a couple times. We've either attended or have scheduled community meetings in wards 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, and 14, plus Fairfax and St. Clair Superior events that are coming up. I'll invite all of you here directly. If there are community meetings in your wards where you would like to hear feedback from your residents on Burke Lakefront Airport, please let me know. Our team is more than happy to attend and to solicit that feedback. We hand out these surveys in person. We've also collected them online. In 5,800 responses in just over a month, which I think is indicative of the conversation around Burke right now. 70% of people consider Cleveland a waterfront city. 85% are supportive or very supportive of creating a more accessible lakefront. And you can see the bar graph on your right, the sort of preferred options for what folks want to see there. And again, this is without a lot of communication on giving the information that we just gave you on what some of these uses could drive in terms of economic impact. So some of the top ones you see are multi-purpose trails, restaurants, open park space, and sports and recreation facilities. And then this is the last slide, finally. In terms of next steps with where we are with Burke, we'll continue to engage this body. If Burke were to close, we obviously need to secure support from our federal delegation. We'll continue to engage with you, with the users of Burke Lakefront Airport. We're having regular conversations with business owners as well as the users of Burke currently. We'll continue that, as well as in conversations with the possible operators interested in redeveloping Burke. Upon formal approval for closure, if and when that happens, at that point we would start sort of a more formal master planning process with more robust and traditional community engagement. Because again, I'll say it one last time, this is not meant to be the definitive master plan for the site. This is a study of what sort of concepts could drive economic impact, could increase public access, and have financially viable funding models. So if we were to get clarity on the likelihood and timeline of Burke closing, at that point we would do a more formal master planning process, and just like any planning and development process, that would all come through this body as well.
And maybe just before we open up for questions, comments, thoughts from you all, I just want to emphasize, Burke Lakefront Airport, I think the whole purpose of these hearings has been, again, to give you all the information to decide where you sit and whether you support the closure of Burke or not. To me, we really cannot, it is almost impossible for us to look at any of these really exciting opportunities, uses that could be at Burke until we have a decision on closure. We have talked a lot about the impact of closure, the process of closure, the budget, what the opportunities are for Burke. But we have to get to the point of deciding to close to make any of this a reality. And so Scott and I were talking about, this earlier today with a group of folks, and they asked, well, have you thought about XYZ? And Scott pointed out, we're on step 7 of 100, right? There is still a lot of work to be done here. This whole goal is really to help you all do your due diligence and make sure that you have the information that you need to decide where you stand on this.
Thank you. I don't have too many questions. I've been engaged in a back and forth on this, but I would like if you're able to speak a little more. So your analysis is that essentially the direct tax revenue of the airport today is about $500,000. This proposed concept could be $2.5 million. So when we talk about in macroeconomics, free trade, and I think we get caught up a lot in if we engage in something, it's going to have a higher revenue, so higher is good, and we don't talk about the displaced element of that, kind of the debits and the credits. What of the current uses at Burke, how would the current uses at Burke be absorbed either on-site, elsewhere within the region, and what share of the current $500,000 do you think we would retain in addition to new revenue should Burke close?
Yeah, it's a great question, Councilman. And the CHAs, or the ESI study that we referred to from 2024 is online and kind of talks about this in detail. So I'm going to do my best to recall, but I might give a follow-up answer. A lot of that $500,000 is parking, related to parking revenue, parking taxes. The ESI study assumed that at least half of that would stay. I think, we didn't look at this specific site, but only a small portion of this is parking. As it relates to airport, like the two main uses on the site right now are the airport and the confined disposal facilities. The CDFs won't stay in, any of these concepts, and so no change there. The airport economic impact is really, what our studies have shown is that we can move nearly everything to Hopkins, with maybe the exception of flight schools, which are pretty low economic impact, which would then, likely go to the county airport. And so when we think regionally, we wouldn't be losing that tax benefit. We would just be relocating it to Hopkins.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that point, has there been an analysis done so that theoretically, Burke closes, things move to Hopkins, what percentage of growth opportunity at Hopkins today is taken up by shifting Burke services over to Hopkins? And really the question for this committee being, how do we most strategically leverage Hopkins moving forward, and would shifting Burke into Hopkins forego other opportunities available to us currently there?
Yeah, to my knowledge, it would not have us forego any opportunities at Hopkins. I could have Brian Francis follow up with a more detailed analysis of why that is the case. But one of the things that we've looked at really closely is if we were to close Burke, what would its impact be on Hopkins? And the impact is positive.
Okay, my final question, you've noted that a facility like what's shown on the screen here, a youth sports facility, is privately financed. In so Westfield, Indiana, Sandusky, Ohio, elsewhere, have those been purely privately financed? Has there been some public component? Really trying to understand what yes, the city would be gaining new revenue, but for what duration of time would the new revenue be subsidizing some ask of the city, whether that is needed or just expected? I think it's an important number to build into our analysis, although I appreciate that this is not a full analysis at this point.
Yeah, I would say that, Councilman Slife, broadly speaking, most of those facilities do use some level of public-private partnership on there. I think what is largely interesting about them, when you look at the direct impact, right, in property tax and things like that, it's not like that dense development that we were talking about that really drives value per acre that goes on. But of course, if we wanted to get to that, one, it would require that we need a market for those things. Two, it would require the city to put a lot of infrastructure in place. So what these facilities provide more so than that direct impact. So you're not having to give as much up in terms of like a TIF or things of that nature, right? But like, it's the indirect spend that comes with that, and that's that broader economic impact. Like another one of the examples that's out there is in Spooky Nook, Pennsylvania. They have the largest indoor facility out there. I think it's about 750,000 square feet. They have an $87 million annual economic impact. So I think what you're trading off for on the youth sports thing is more direct income that comes from property taxes and things of that nature, and you pick up more of an indirect spend.
And I would just add in, there's a lot of these across the country, and there's many, many different examples of how they are financed. There are many that have sort of a public-private partnership component where there are incentives or land discounts, things like that, to help facilitate development. There are also plenty that are entirely privately financed by a developer who raises traditional debt and equity for the project.
And maybe just one additional point is when we think about redevelopment on Burke Lakefront Airport, similar to the stadium site, the city is the one who owns the property, and so we have as much leverage as you could possibly have to dictate both terms of an agreement and public access related to any of those agreements.
Thank you. So moving forward, and maybe even offline, I would like to get a better sense of discussions on how these sorts of facilities are financed. So if you live in Ward 15, West 168 is being resurfaced this summer. Hooray! It costs $550,000 to do the entirety of West 168th Street. So more than, I guess, what Burke currently generates in the budget. and I bring it up because I think sometimes numbers are large, but when you consider how big Cleveland is and what the scale of needs are, when you start dividing those dollars by 15, not necessarily because everything has to be divided by 15 equally, but just for sake of discussion, numbers, the direct impact into a neighborhood gets pretty small pretty quickly, and I don't want to end up in situations where it sounds like a lot of money, but then you're like, oh, it turned out it was only $3,000, and it's not enough money to do anything of impact. So I think my interest in understanding potential asks of the public sector in anything that happens at Burke is to try to ascertain what we are foregoing and for what duration of time, so that we can determine are we talking about direct revenues that have a measurable impact, someone living on Seville Avenue or Munn Road or anywhere in between, or is it a large number for the budget, but it still doesn't satiate our needs to deal with all of the deferred maintenance and neighborhood investment that we hear from residents wanting on a day-to-day basis. But I think that really becomes a numbers exercise. It would be useful to understand more specifically how other facilities are financed.
We're happy to put together some case studies for you for what the business plans have looked like for some of those other facilities.
Okay. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Councilman Jones, and then I have Polensek.
It is really good to take a look at the suggestions that have been made. Mr. Chairman, to Mrs. Trevisano, can we get a copy of the report that you showed, the breakdown in the slides here, as relates to the public perspective and opinion on the site?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you broke these analyses down here, I just want to really focus a little bit on it, just a tad here. You stated that in the response, 70%, it says, do you consider Cleveland a waterfront city? Was that the question that was asked? And of the respondents, it was 70% that said yes?
To the councilman through the chair, yes. That was the exact question that was asked.
Was there any questions that was asked on what the citizens would like to see there on the lakefront?
To the councilman through the chair, yes. So there's a place where folks can just comment qualitatively their own ideas and whatever they want to see, and we've collected that and we've sort of categorized them, and that's part of a report that we can share with you. Additionally, we asked just point blank all of the uses that you see on the screen in this presentation here, and just ask folks sort of yes or no for these uses.
And how did this opinion poll go out? How was it done?
Yeah,
'Cause I didn't get it. No one asked
Sure.
me.
Sure, to the councilman through the chair.
And I'm a councilman. Why didn't they ask me?
So respectfully, Councilman, we did reach out to you 3 or 4 times via email.
You have my cell phone. I
sure.
give it to everybody.
Okay.
And Scott, you have it.
Sure.
So you could have called me.
Sure, we'll give you a call.
Right.
This has also been heavily publicized. We've been in neighborhood block club meetings in wards 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, and 14, and are eager to go
You've been
again.
into those neighborhoods already?
Yes.
Did the survey happen into those communities? Were they given the copies of surveys, or did they go online and do the survey?
Both. So we have an online, obviously, option that folks can go online on their phones or on their computer to. We also have actual cards that we can hand out to get responses directly there as well. And Councilman, I would add, the survey is still live and up, and we're not done collecting information. We're sort of at a midpoint, so eager to come out to your ward and attend your community meetings and talk about it as well.
I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, the plans that we have here, how long have we been working on these plans?
To the councilman through the chair, a handful of weeks, not a very long time. I mean, you can sort of.
So
The-
this is
the
just
actual,
this is
like-
just a rough sketch. Now,
That
is this
is
a
right.
rough sketch from what? How are we drawing this all together? Is
Yeah.
it coming from the actual survey, or is just How is this put together?
Well, so I would say a couple things. Scott talked a little bit about the group of stakeholders that were convened to kind of brainstorm some ideas from at least the civic sector. That's, including Metro Parks, it includes Destination Cleveland, the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, all of those folks, the county. This is also a reflection of the years of work done in lakefront master planning and what we've heard from community members about what they want to see both on the stadium site but about the lakefront generally. That kind of underpins everything. And there's also been hundreds of years of master plans done for the lakefront, some on Burke, some on the stadium. So this specific picture, a couple weeks, but it is underpinned by literally a century of people working on what to do with our lakefront.
And to be more specific, we took the data that we have from the 3 years of community engagement the city did on the stadium site, from the community engagement work that Metro Parks did on Gordon Park and for their Cheers project in their sailing center, as well as community engagement data that exists from past versions of lakefront master plans for this site as well as for the stadium site, and looked at it really through that lens. We have, dating back 20 or 30 years, there's been pretty much ongoing community engagement on potential uses for the lakefront.
Now, you talked about some of these plans. Can you make some of those available as well to me?
Yes, they
Okay.
are. They are available,
Is-
and we'll make sure that you.
Is
get
it
them.
like a room I can go into, like, a skiff and take a look at it? Like
You don't
the-
need to. We can. We'll email them to you.
Because one of the things is, I know that we've had a number of plans, but those plans have never been, like, made public. I'm going to go on, because I have a limited amount of time, and I want to be able to go right on in on what my colleague, Mr. Slife, talked about, is the financial side of things. And is one of the things I've talked about sitting here at the table. And Tom McNair opened it up with talking about this being a generator of resources for the city of Cleveland. The question would be, because right now the city is facing a $1.8 billion in terms of debt. And so with $1.8 billion in terms of debt that we're facing right now, how does this help us begin to deal with those issues? Because a lot of times I've sat here at this table and we've given away a lot of stuff here at this table, but we really fundamentally are not generating funds. And it was one of the things I talked about when we started talking about Burke Lake Airport. How do we turn the city into the capacity to really generate funds through our general fund? And though we have these public-private partnerships, they haven't really worked out financially for the city of Cleveland. Even so far as Mr. McNair realizes, being in economic development, we have not been able to even get money back from people who owe us for grants and funds and that we've given to them in the past. So how do we, with what we're talking about here, a space and time where we could potentially generate funds, how does this really equate financially? So though we've kind of like brushed across some of the discussion here about what it could potentially generate, is there something concrete that you will later be able to bring to us that can help us understand, that if we invest here, what does that financially mean for the city of Cleveland? And as the council person stated, these streets are costing us a lot of money. I do one street, it's $283,000. I have over 275 different streets in my neighborhood. I can only on average get 6 of those streets done. Citizens want to know about, and I've got calls all day long about streets, bumpity roads, and stuff like that. So I need to have something that's going to be substance sitting here at this table of discussion. And though the golf course looks nice and I don't know what it's going to really look like at the end of the day. The ideals and the concepts look good, but what does it actually benefit, and how does it actually benefit the citizens of the city of Cleveland? Because right now we've heard the testimony of Mike Polensik earlier. We lost the Browns, and we've lost a lot in the city of Cleveland. So the question is, in my mind, how do we turn this into a financial possibility of being able to have something that's going to be a win-win, not just for those who are rich and wealthy and local development corporations or CDCs or however you want to put the ideal and concept together, or the construct. The issue is, how do we in the city of Cleveland, when we're making these investments, be whole? And how do we get a return on our investments, and how do we, on the other side, and so one of you guys can answer this because I know my time is limited. So it's an issue of investments and how do we get a return. And then the next issue is we used to have down here in the Flats, it was a real attraction for us. I remember when I was much younger, Tom probably remember those days, and it was packed down there. And we had a lot of energy, synergy down there, and then a couple of shots rang out, and now it's an issue of safety. So when we are talking about this component here, we need to have a perspective of what that safety means. And then lastly, so there's two questions, there's a third one, talking about the air show. The air show has been here forever. So I don't want us to have the poo-poo concept of, oh, bad, too bad, they're just not going to be here, too sad. And then I want to know a little bit more about its finances because you touched on that. So what is and how much resources is generated to the city's coffers with that being out there as well?
So I can start, Councilman, and then I want Chief McNair to also add. So to the Councilman through the chair, one, I think high level, we share the same goal, right? We want this 450 acres of lakefront land to be an economic engine for the city of Cleveland. I can tell you confidently, it's not doing that as a private airport that is used for fewer than 40,000 operations. And I don't see a path to it becoming that.
I understand that argument. You made that argument well in
Great.
previous pieces. What I want to know about is how we generate with what you're talking about in
Yes.
terms of the presentation here.
Yes, and so, I think Tom can add into, each of these individual uses has an opportunity to drive economic benefit to the city of Cleveland, whether it's competitive youth sports, whether it is recreation paths, a marina, all of these are, again, trying to find this balance of having really substantial public access to be something that all Clevelanders can enjoy and access, being privately financeable. If we came and sat here and said the city should build a 450-acre park ourselves and maintain a 450-acre park, I would tell you guys to kick me out of this chair and don't come back until we have a better plan. That's not what we're proposing. We know that we have to have a plan that is privately financeable and that can be maintained by the private sector. That's one of the benefits of all of these components here. And then that last facet is economic impact. What are uses that are going to drive visitors, drive businesses, give people a reason to be excited to live in Cleveland because they point to this 450 acres and say, that's a youth sports complex that my kids get to go use. That is an amenity to me, a resident of the city of Cleveland, that I am proud to have. These are incredible walking trails that I can't wait to go use and teach my kid to ride a bike on, right? That's not happening with Burke. I don't hear from a lot of residents who are excited because they are flying their private plane in and out of Burke. That's just not what's happening. So each of these individual elements has their own economic benefit. I think when, and this is part of the question that Councilman Slife was asking, is what are the individual what's the business plan for each? That's not what we're presenting today. We are talking about a concept plan that has a lot of opportunity for the city that can be privately financed. Once we get to the point of we have the authority for Burke to close, then we'll be able to really hit the ground running, talking to other business owners and folks who want to build on the site. Right now, we're just not at that point yet. We're still at the decision-making process, and frankly, I don't want to get too far ahead of where council is. And then before I turn it back over to Tom on the air show, completely agree that the air show is a really important part of Cleveland culture and something that we want to maintain. I'm not in the best position to explain all of the finances of the air show. I've just looked at their 990 and know what I can find out publicly. I'm really eager to sit down with the air show and have been asking to have that conversation with them. And my hope is that they come to City Council at some point too, so you all can learn more about the economics of the air show as well.
So I want to say, through the chair to Councilman, I greatly appreciate the way you phrase financial possibility out of this. And I think it is important to remember the opportunity in front of us for 450 acres that is on our waterfront, that is immediately adjacent to downtown. There has been a lot of work that has gone into, and again, to be very clear, Berkeley Front Airport is active. There's a lot of steps it would take to close it, right? And so it would have to close to get to that opportunity. But we've done a lot of work that we have looked at what are the direct and indirect economic impact of Berkeley Front Airport, and we know it's not much. And we know that most of that revenue could be maintained within the city of Cleveland. And so if you think about that opportunity, there's almost two different pathways you can go. In a different market, right, you could probably pursue that more direct revenue approach, right? If we had, and Manhattan is one of the very few office markets in the country that has truly recovered post-pandemic, right, that is like driving office market. If we had a residential market like Austin, Texas, where there are people flocking, like we could probably look at that direct value, right, where you're constructing a lot of mixed use, things of that nature, but there is substantial cost to the municipality in terms of like building out the infrastructure needed to make that happen, and you would need a market to support it. That other pathway is looking at more of the indirect aspect of how we can generate revenues on this site. And that's where all of these different possibilities have come from. Like everything that came on here are things that are constructible, they are things that are financeable, and they are things that will substantially drive traffic into our downtown on a year-round basis, which creates a significant amount of indirect spend that comes out there. And there are tons of examples of that. And in those examples, it costs us very little to do because these are privately financeable that is coming along, right? Like even in the public park aspect of things, like that is teed up for a Clean Ohio application the way that very few places are, right? Like there are ways to raise the dollars for this. There are private companies that would absolutely come in and want to invest capital, right, to build the types of facilities that we're showing here. And again, 450 acres is a lot. You could do some of these things, you could do all of them, right? There are a ton of possibilities on here. But again, when you start looking at the numbers on this, like unequivocally, almost anything that we would do drives more revenue than what Berkeley Front Airport does. And I've heard a lot of the arguments on like, oh, how Berkeley Front Airport can be a tool to retrain or attract businesses. In 1986, we had 12 Fortune 500 companies located in downtown Cleveland. Anyone know how many we have today?
Less.
3, right? So if this is a facility that is designed to somehow attract or retain those types of corporations, like it hasn't been doing it, right? But again, I think some of the stuff that we're talking about here, you can look all over the country. You do not find those types of amenities in their downtown. And when you pair them with the infrastructure that we've already spent decades investing in to create, right? Again, I caught the tail end of the flats, right? But I also remember when I moved into downtown Cleveland in the early 2000s, right? There were like 2,000 people living downtown. There's 25,000 today. Like before we built the gateway complexes, you could have fired a cannon down West 6th Street and not hit a soul, right? And so today there are people that are coming on a consistent basis for that. Those were conscious policy choices that were invested in tourism, hotel, driving folks downtown, right? And sure, the Browns have made the decision that they are going to move to another location, and with that $31 million in economic impact is going to fast after them. But like some of the things we're showing here can meet or exceed that, right? And actually, if you think about the youth sports thing, like it can exceed it in a very different way, because this is not just 10 to 12 dates a year where there's a massive amount of people coming down at once that are largely going just for food and beverage, right? The types of customers that are coming in for a facility like that, again, you're bringing in the competitive stuff on weekends that is happening on a consistent basis. Those are people that are staying in your hotels. Those are people that are again, they're going to catch shows. They're going to go to the Cosmo. They're going to do all these things. But it's also going to be bringing people down to use those facilities during the week, right? You build the right size indoor facility on there, that is driving people who are still coming downtown, right? They're supporting the restaurants, they're supporting all those sorts of things. It's supporting, RTA just had to close the waterfront line because there's not a lot of traffic, right? Like adding a facility like this that is directly connected to public transportation is a huge advantage that goes on. And the other thing that I continue to think about when I think about opening Berkeley Front Airport to our single greatest natural asset and connecting our downtown and our city to our waterfront, again, you think about that 17th and 18th Street connection that goes on there. Our downtown almost unceremoniously ends at East 12th Street, right? If you look at a map, that whole northeast quadrant of downtown Cleveland is basically surface parking lots and one-story buildings that are like quasi-vacant, no one quite knows what's going on. You connect that to our waterfront, you've created fertile ground for the next 30 years.
And I would just add one thing to the councilman through the chair. Everything Tom said is exactly correct. One thing I do want to point out about these specific sort of fit studies and how we've laid them out is it leaves room for future growth. The site is so large. 450 acres is an enormous piece of land. And looking at this image right here, if in 15, 20 years, a large job creator, a large company wants to come and relocate here, we can carve off 50 of these acres and still have a 130-acre public park on the site. If we see the sort of growth that we want to achieve and we see more demand for housing and hotels and all of those things, we can carve off 20 acres and still have a 160-acre park. So I wanted to add that there, that we are trying to plan for the future and leave in flexibility if we do see the results that we want to see down the road.
With a quick follow-up.
You didn't touch upon one of the questions, which is really important, and I'm sorry that you got it on the back end. You should have been on the heyday with the flats. So you didn't see what I saw then, just a little bit. So, but the concern here and what's really important is anything that we do has to have a safety component in it. And of the three questions, and it sort of kind of, I get that this is conceptual, but you know, having those numbers, knowing what the financial impact is going to mean for the city of Cleveland is going to be important for me to be supportive of it. One, and then two, if you could talk a little bit about the safety proposition of it, because the citizens of the city of Cleveland in a number of our neighborhoods don't feel safe. And I can certainly speak for my neighborhood, and it's one of the reasons why we've had problems in the flats in terms of the issues. When I talk to the various different owners in the various different establishments, one of the most important things to them is safety and how we deal with that. And I know that, Mr. Chairman, to Mrs. Trevisano and to the panel that's here talking about this subject matter, you know, you really can't control who's going to bring a gun or have a gun. But the issue is, how do we deal with safety with this whole proposition and making this area safe for people? Because people are not going to come to the downtown area to really enjoy themselves in our nice restaurants, and they're certainly not going to come here if we have all of this available and they don't feel safe. So please talk about the possibilities of safety.
Yeah, to the councilman through the chair, you know, that's a really great operational question and hard to answer with specifics when we're still in conceptual. What I will say is all of the partners on the bottom of this image, the port, the metro parks, Black Environmental Leaders, county, city, North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation. One of the reasons it was so important to get buy-in from those civic sector partners is because I anticipate it will be, at least in part, if not in full, the responsibility of those partners to help us deliver. So when we think about something like lakefront safety of public park, you know, Metro Parks is, I think, a great expert in how to do that. They've done it very successfully in Edgewater and other parts of our downtown lakefront, or in our city's lakefront. So I don't have a specific operational response as much as I have a commitment of buy-in from the public and civic sector that is a shared priority and something that we absolutely understand is foundational to make this successful.
Well, I appreciate that. So something that maybe is you got the three areas that I'm concerned about. You know, if you can start really giving me the numbers, talking about how it benefits the city, have a safety plan or a proposition of the safety plan or how it would work. Those are some key points that I'd like to see. And then ideally, when it's all said and done, Mr. Chairman, finally wrapping it up, is when do we expect something like this to happen if things are ideal? I know that you're already in Washington, D.C. working on this. If this closes down, when it closes down, how fast are we looking at possibility of seeing this develop?
Sure.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that would have to happen. There's both the federal authority to close, and then there's any council approval that would need to happen related to the closure. And then there's also helping all of the existing businesses that are operating at Burke relocate. Let's say that, you know, if there was an act of Congress tomorrow, I would hope that we could be at a point, I would expect that we would be at a point of really getting tangible on development within 6 months of that, being able to do the public engagement process, getting more of a master plan. We could do that in concurrence with helping to relocate all of the existing businesses there, identifying the impact, and then, shovels in the ground 24 months after we would have that congressional authorization, assuming council was on the same page as the congressional
Thank you,
delegation.
Mr. Chairman.
And to the councilman through the chair, Jessica mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, we are on step 7 of several thousand, right? Like this is us bringing these ideas to the table up front and right away to get feedback and to sort of start this conversation. So I think, and to Jessica's point, if Burke were to close, or if Congress were to authorize it to close tomorrow, we're still a long ways away, and there's still a lot of work to be done before anything were to actually happen on the site.
Thank you. Chief McNair, do you have any further comment on your glory days in the flats?
Any photos, maybe?
Luckily, that was before digital photos.
Hearing none, I will turn it over to Councilman Polensek, followed by Harsh and Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my honorable colleagues, and again, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your approach to this critical discussion. And as I've said before, we as a body and collectively as a city, we cannot continue to make bad decisions. The recent Browns decision will go down probably as one of the worst decisions ever made in my time in city council. An absolute disaster that the Browns are leaving downtown Cleveland. And I'll go right in and follow up on that. We are here now before this committee hearing about a plan for Burke Airport, but yet the Cleveland Browns Stadium is leaving. We hear no discussions about what's going to go there. We look at the lakefront from the area to the west of the Mather, and again, I'll quote, I'll use a little bit more colorful language. You can shoot a cannon off to the west of the Mather and not hit anybody in the ass down there, okay? So we hear no plan for that portion of the lakefront, but now we're going to focus on Burke, and we're going to eliminate Burke. You know, if you were talking about a site that was like when my mother grew up in Glenville, and my grandfather on my great-grandparents on 47th Street, when it was a dump down there and a landfill, I'd say, man, I'm with you. I'm all for you. Let's get rid of that dump. Let's improve that lakefront park. Let's create a lakefront park. But what we have is an airport down there, and an airport that's been there for some time and has been discussed at this table, at one time worked. At one time, 100,000 flights out of Burke. And I know that because the commissioners have called me. And I've asked the chairman of this committee at some point, I think we're going to have to bring people to the table who worked there or have worked there. And we do have the power of subpoena, the city council. I know I used it when I was council president, if people are reluctant. But at the end of the day, I dream all the time. Because I'm Cleveland. I never lived anyplace else. I was born in Glenville neighborhood. Now grew up in Collinwood. I dream of all the time, and I think of all the time what was that when Euclid Avenue was a mass of humanity walking every day, and the department stores. And I think of a school system that functioned. And now we're confronted with 18 schools being closed and 410 teachers and administrators being laid off. I think of what was downtown, and just right now, a closed hotel, Reserve Square in foreclosure. I'm meeting this afternoon with a group of business people who are greatly concerned about downtown and the number of foreclosures. They're telling me another 6 major foreclosures could be happening in the downtown area. So I want to believe, I want Cleveland to be its best. And I want to see jobs and opportunity. And so when I look at these wonderful schematics of what the lakefront could be if Burke disappears, the first question being a member of the Finance Committee, and I ask this again, at this moment in time, who is in Washington? Who is lobbying besides the mayor to kill Burke Airport? Who have we retained? Can the administration tell me who that is?
So the city of Cleveland, to the councilman through the chair, the city of Cleveland is leading the efforts to educate and advocate for closure of Burke, although we also have a strong alignment from Greater Cleveland Partnership, who has also been in DC talking about Burke.
But do we
Lakefront
have a
Airport closure.
lobbyist
We do.
doing, who's the lobbyist lobbying?
We have Kate Hallahan is the lobbyist for the airport that has been helping with the aviation-related portions.
And do we know what that cost is, that lobbying effort?
Not off the top of my head, but I can.
I'm going to
find
make that
cost for you.
request through the chair.
And I'll say legislation did just come through. That is the Port Control General Lobbyist.
That's
so
right.
so
Okay.
the way it
It's
was
not
explained to
addition.
us was that it was the, and I'll pause you, as it pertains to getting federal grants for runway rehabilitation at Hopkins and anything generally, there is a lobbyist that assists Port Control with that, but that is not this person's exclusive charge on this or any other individual topic.
That's correct. Thank you, Council.
So the question was, who is it? So who really is it? Who's doing it?
So the name of the firm, the lobbying firm, is Hallahan Strategies or something
Strategies,
like that.
that's right.
It's a she being
You said
Hallahan,
Hallahan?
Hallahan, and she's an individual that had previously worked in the federal government, FAA, DOT, that does comparable work for a number of other airport systems.
Thank you.
So, but that's a part of her role,
Correct.
lobbying to close Burke. Besides, and we know the mayor has lobbied to close Burke. Do you know what the estimated demolition cost would be for Burke Airport?
To the councilman through the chair, I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't know that there would, depending on what we did with the site, there might not have to be much demolition to Burke Lakefront Airport. So it's in the ESI study from 2024, the demolition cost, but like I said, depending, you might notice the field house is sited similar to where the current terminal and hangar is. And so depending on the use of the site, we might not have to do much demolition.
Okay, but I would ask for an updated, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for an updated demolition cost.
Thank you.
It's 450 acres, obviously. So I'd like to know what the estimated demolition cost is.
To the councilman through the chair
Yeah.
on that point quickly, the way that when we're looking at privately financed uses, which a lot of these are, the
Yes.
sports complex, these fields, demolition is built into the cost of development for them. It's really common across the city for developers to absorb the cost, absorb site work and demolition costs as part of their business venture.
Okay, so then you put me right into my next line of questioning. On both concepts, what is the estimated cost, construction cost?
On both concepts, and I'm going to qualify this as well, same to my last statement. On both concepts, the estimated construction cost is somewhere around $600 million. However, nearly all of that would be privately financed. When you're looking at the vast majority of these uses, these are profitable businesses, and those are not costs that would be absorbed by the general public.
Okay.
And sorry, just to add to the councilman through the chair and for our listening audience, each of
Yeah.
these uses is identified in the ESI study that was circulated to council and
Okay.
posted online and has estimated cost of each of those uses as well.
So estimated cost, $600 million for each one, and you've indicated, again, that these costs will be borne by private developers. Now, I've been here for 14 consecutive terms. If I believed in that comment, I would believe in the Easter Bunny. Okay?
Easter Bunny.
An
You believe
Easter
in the
Bunny
Easter
would be
Bunny.
more relevant to me because I have yet to see the corporate community do it out of their own pockets on any major project here. It's either TIFs, it's tax abatement, it's everything else they can get. I mean, give me a break. I mean, I was born early, but it wasn't yesterday morning. Anything that goes down there of $600 million project, they are going to have their hand out like they're standing up here on Prospect Avenue. Now, come on, let's be realistic. We have to make the right decisions. If Burke is to leave, if Burke is to go away, then what we have to be realistic with the taxpayers and with our citizens and what this is going to cost, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. In 1982, I built four ball diamonds. In 82, cost me $1.2 million. I mean, when I look at this, cha-ching, that's what I see here. It's beautiful plans, beautiful concepts. Again, what I need to hear from somebody from the administration. It's been talked about the economic engine. If Burke is going away, you gotta create an economic engine for this city, and especially how it's gonna impact the east side of the city of Cleveland. We've lost half of city council. We've lost half of the population of the city of Cleveland, from my time being here, have left. And now we have more people blowing out because of these schools being closed. Okay? We have got to step back and we got to draw the line in the sand. And whatever we do on the Burke site, whether it be to reimagine Burke Airport and make it work as some people believe it can work, or if not, if we're going to do something else, then we have to figure out how there's going to be a real revenue stream for the city of Cleveland. I'm trying to develop a 150-acre park right now on Lakeshore Boulevard, attached to a neighborhood. So there is east side neighborhoods that are walkable to the lakefront. I've got one of them. I've got 2 miles of lakefront in my ward. Euclid Beach, Wildwood, Villa Angela. 150 acres I'm trying to develop right now with Metro Parks. And that's a heck of a lift. A heck of a lift we're doing there. And I want to thank Tom for his engagement with me in trying to reimagine Lakeshore Boulevard, which he knows, again, is a major lift, what we're trying to do out there. So what I'm looking at here is I just see dollar signs. I see how are we going to do this? How are we going to create that economic engine that our citizens and our kids and our children for their future can benefit, and how we can reestablish Cleveland, as Tom indicated. We once were right there with Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco with regard to Fortune 500 companies, right there. And I want to go back to what I said earlier. Due to one bad decision after another, no vision or private agendas, those major corporations blew out of here. They left us, and they didn't look back. And so it is what it is, and we have to figure out what we're going to do, Mr. Chairman. So the comment was made that Burke generates $500,000 in revenue. Does that incorporate the private businesses that are there, or have we taken into account how many people they employ, what they're paying in taxes? Who's calculating that, Mr. Chairman, to the administration?
To the councilman through the chair, the $500,000 is the direct tax revenue to the city of Cleveland. So that's parking tax, that's income tax, that's limited property tax. That is the limit of the direct tax revenue to the city of Cleveland from Berkeley.
But so that doesn't take into account the businesses that are there?
That it does.
It does?
It does. Like their
Okay.
income tax generated from the
The
businesses
their
there.
employees?
Correct.
Okay, because that's very important. That this body have a real picture as to what presently is being generated out of Burke Airport. And then, Mr. Chairman, the mention's been made here about Metro Parks. Has Metro Parks been engaged in this plan at all?
Yes.
And from what capacity have they been engaged?
Metro Park staff did the plan. They're the ones who put the plan together. So
Both concepts?
both concepts, correct?
They put them together?
Yes. Yeah, they used in-house staff so that we wouldn't have to pay
Okay.
consultants to do it.
So who would operate the golf courses?
We don't have an answer to who would operate the golf course yet, but we know that Metro Parks could be interested in
Okay.
operating the golf course.
Because thank God, we can't operate a golf course.
Correct. I can say
We-
confidently it will not be the city of
I
Cleveland.
I hope everybody in attendance read that expose in Cleveland.com about Highland, about what a disaster that has turned into, Highland Golf Course for the city. So it seems like we can't touch golf courses, okay? We can't touch golf courses. We can't run them. We can't operate them properly. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to belabor the point. I want to thank you and my colleagues at this committee. And my last point is this, and Ms. Trevisano touched on it briefly. There are lobbyists in Washington right now lobbying to kill Burke Airport. The mayor is lobbying to kill Burke Airport. I'm assuming there are other, we were told at the last committee that Jimmy Haslam is lobbying to kill Burke Airport as well on behalf of the city. And so these are all factors that we have to take into consideration as to what's been transpiring. But there's one major factor that has never been discussed at this table, and the fact is this is a legislative body. The rotunda was designed, City Hall was designed, the rotunda for separation of powers, the administration and the council. You're lobbying to kill a city asset, and yet this body has no legislation before us. There has not even been a submission of legislation to kill Burke Airport. So I say this again to the administration. I can't speak for any of my colleagues, but I'm not going to be disrespected. This body, there's 15 of us now, and we're going to have to decide, this body, at some point, what we're going to do with Burke Airport. Are we going to continue its operation, or are we going to, if the federal government acts as the administration and the mayor hopes for, to kill Burke Airport? There's going to have to be legislation submitted to us. And I will tell you, that's going to be a real interesting time, because I'm never going to delegate my authority to anyone. Ain't never going to happen. As long as I breathe air here, I'm not going to delegate my authority. So, Mr. Chairman, I would say to the administration, be very mindful of the charter, be very mindful of your responsibilities and our responsibility, because I'm not going to punt. I'm not going to give up my authority. So at some point, you're going to have to submit legislation on Burke, whether it stays or where it goes. And Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to reinforce that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And just two, I guess a request and a comment. There's a pool at Impet Park. It doesn't make any money. It's not supposed to make money. It's a public asset. It's a service. So I'm asking because we can all agree we're not great at managing golf courses. It would be interesting to understand from a Metro Park standpoint, like there's 3 Metro Parks golf courses in the Rock River Valley. Like, what revenue do they generate? How does that compare with their tax dollars? How would this be different than those golf courses? Because there's a universe where Little Met doesn't make money. It's a service, and it's a service that people really value. But so we can put that into the model. I just want to reiterate to the audience listening that when we talk about impacts, we're really trying to focus on direct revenues. So if somebody works in the Burke terminal right now, they go down, they pay to park, they pay 2.5% income tax, that's their direct revenue. Now, if they go to Subway for lunch, them having been downtown and going to Subway is going to, there's a relationship there, but it becomes very difficult for us to quantify, and that's why you see these economic impact models that are like, this Denny's has a $7 billion economic generation. It's so the numbers get so convoluted that I think that they are becoming increasingly they become less useful as you move away from the direct impact. But since we are in charge of the City of Cleveland's general revenue fund, I have been asking the administration to focus exclusively on those resources so that we can have a more confident conversation rather than pinning all of our hopes and aspirations on someone getting Subway 3 days a week versus 2 days a week. So with that, I will turn it over to Councilman Harsh, followed by Gray and Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman Slife. I'll just jump right in through the chair. Where does the dredge go from the Cuyahoga River if we shut down the toxic landfill that is Burke?
So to the councilman through the chair, there are currently 3 CDF facilities operating on Burke. 2 of them are almost at capacity, and those are 2 that we're not including in these fit studies because in 2029 they will reach their capacity. One of the many purposes of the Cheers project that the port is working on is to absorb that dredge in the future.
So through the chair, they will just start building new islands
Correct.
north of the East 55th Marina?
Correct, with the exception of there's one CDF facility in this image that you see is not touched, CDF 9. That is a recyclable CDF facility. So they bring dredge there. It is then used for, is
Okay.
cleaned, it is used for fill for other construction sites.
And through the chair, if I go out to Burke right now and if I tiptoe around the airport into what is the dredge dumping site, there's a fence there. But if I jump that fence, who stops me from running out there right now?
The Port of Cleveland.
The Port of Cleveland. Okay. And through the chair, the Port of Cleveland currently provides, so they currently manage all the land out there that isn't Burke.
To the councilman through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And through the chair, what does the port think about their new dredge site?
To the councilman through the chair, the port has always intended for those 2 CDFs to end in 2029. So this is no change from their operations. What the port feels very strongly about is
Okay.
maintaining the CDF 9 in perpetuity so that they can continue recycling dredge there. And that is part of why we're continuing to show
Okay.
out on this site.
And then through the chair, so because it's been so for if people listening don't quite know what I'm talking about, every year, however often, we drag chemicals out of the bottom of the Cuyahoga River, chemicals that have been settling there over decades and maybe even a century now. It's pollution. And we dig it out from the bottom of the lake and we take it over there and we dump it there, and it is not healthy, it's not environmentally sound, but it has to go somewhere else. We don't have a shipping channel in the Cuyahoga River. So in order to keep the shipping channel open, we have to remove these toxins, and that's what's currently making the land at Burke expand. So through the chair, what are the environmental impacts of having people out there on top of this? How much time and money have we put into engaging the environmental study part of this? And what's the future look like in terms of just, we're not going to give kids cancer out there golfing.
Yeah, so to the councilman through the chair, very good questions, and we've been talking about this quite a lot. So a lot of due diligence, including environmental assessments, exist for Burke Lakefront Airport. And everything that we have, tens of thousands of pages, this is a public document as well. It's on the city's website, and happy to share it with this body directly. We've had an engineering firm complete sort of a memo summarizing those
But
tens of
through the chair,
thousands.
we've done environmental 1 and environmental 2?
Yeah, yes.
We have.
Yes, and a majority of the site, including a majority of the CDF facilities, have received what are called NFAs, or no further action letters,
Okay.
which means that you are able to develop certain uses with no further remediation action
Through
required.
the chair, I assume that means as long as we don't dig.
Correct, yes.
It stays capped.
It stays capped, and there's a certain amount of fill on top of it.
Okay.
To the councilman through the chair, one of the reasons that we're looking at low density or recreation-focused
Right.
development is that it doesn't require any additional remediation. I will say we are in the
Right.
process now of what is called a health human risk assessment, which sort of moves beyond just what are you legally allowed to build, and if a toddler puts his hand in the dirt
Yeah.
and puts it in his mouth, will there be a risk there?
Through the chair, can you share those environmental studies with us?
Yes.
I don't know if we have them
The-
already, and if we do, I apologize, but we can put them in a share folder. This is sort of just getting at my next question, though, which is I'm having a hard time figuring out, how we have a public space that's privately financed. Privately financed was one of the earlier goals, yet public space. Right now, Burke is publicly owned. The city owns it, right? It's publicly owned, but it's not public space. You can go hang out in the terminal if you want, but you can't walk out on the runway for good reason. And then the port has the rest of it. But how do we manage private investment with retaining public access? How do those?
So
blend?
to the councilman through the chair, I'll start, and Jason can jump in as well. Looking at some of the uses, thank you, Councilman. A competitive youth sports facility specifically, right? That is a profitable business that can be privately financed and privately operated. When you are negotiating into development agreements with private developers, we have leverage in that the city controls the dirt. So we can ask and require through a public-private partnership or through lease negotiations that in addition to operating facilities as competitive revenue-driving youth sports tournaments, they also need to be open on days where they're not tournaments to the general public. That's one example of the sports facility that is sort of privately financed with public uses. All of these uses across this plan pull on sort of different levers of those three principles, right? One was no significant public subsidy or sort of philanthropic need. The other was public access, and the other was economic impact. So golf course, public park, sports complex,
Yeah.
all those are sort of pulling to different ones.
So it's interesting to me because, you know, people in Cleveland have taken to handing out tents to the homeless community lately and encouraging them to set up tent cities. And it's hard to imagine an RV location down there that doesn't become a magnet for the unhoused. Yet we're talking about private investment. They're not going to put up with that at all, right? I'm curious how we're going to interact public access that we want, public access that will be frowned upon, with private investment and blending those three things. And I'm not sure how we get around to that.
Yeah, to the councilman through the chair, I think it's a great point that you put out there as you talk about potentially tent cities, so to speak, coming up in like RV area. I think the benefit of having it primarily financed is they'll be in control of that site. Well, they not own the site, but they'll be in control of the site, and they're
Right.
certainly not going to put up with that. And our partners who would be operating those public spaces, similar to like the metro parks, they don't
Yeah.
allow that either. That they could control that as well.
But through the chair, then you can't have public access if you've got private investment restricting access.
Councilman through the chair, it's a great point, but it's also making sure that we maintain a quality public space that's for everyone, and making sure that those uses, as you have mentioned, are not would be detrimental to that.
But and through the chair, all I'm saying is it's one or the other. Either you're going to have public access and you're going to have tent cities, or you're not going to have public access. I mean, you can't decide which members of the public are allowed to access it, right? That's what public means, is everybody can come.
Yeah, to the councilman through the chair, I don't think I agree with that premise. I think that there are plenty of examples throughout the city of Cleveland where we have public access and not, unfettered public access. Edgewater Beach is a great example, right? That is a publicly accessible space that is still well maintained and overseen by Cleveland Metro Parks. When we think about something like an RV facility, it's not out of the question to think that we find another operator similar to Metro Parks that is able to find that balance of, oh, there's a playground available on this RV facility. That playground is accessible for everybody to get to, but like you have to rent a space to then park your RV on the site. And if somebody's not renting a space, then, they shouldn't have something parked there. I think the same way that we can maybe catastrophize, we can also think optimistically about ways for us to be creative with these spaces.
So the idea would be to sublease the land to a private investor who will set up hours of operation for the public.
Correct.
It's to the councilman through the chair. Public access easements, or those being stipulations of lease agreements,
Okay.
are fairly common.
And through the chair, how long do you think a sublease will have to be in order to encourage a private investor to dump money in there? Are we talking about a 100-year lease or a 50-year lease?
To the councilman through the chair, it depends on the use. I can tell you, housing, hospitality generally requires somewhere around a 75-year lease for
Right.
something to be financeable.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is that if they were to privately invest down there on a sublease of 75 years and then their investment fails, are we roped into a 75-year lease on a failed experiment?
So to the councilman through the chair, there are many ways to structure lease agreements with sort of performance metrics attached to them as a condition of a lease. There's lots of ways to mitigate against that. But I will say, again, I want to reiterate, these are conceptual fit studies, and we are very early in this entire process. There are lots of challenges, lots of opportunities, and lots of things to figure out.
My concern would be that we don't do that, though. My concern would be that we bring somebody in, we sublease to them to be the private operator of public space, they go belly up, and we're just stuck in a lease that generates no revenue for however many generations.
So through the chair to
We have to
councilman,
plan for failure as well
in
as
that
success.
scenario, again, we control the land, we control the lease. There would be, again, that is fairly common to set up lease terms in ways that would protect the city, to evict tenants and do things of that nature. I also want to comment on some of the public access points on this and a little bit on the RV park nature of things. But one, there are plenty of examples around there around the public space way that we're talking about. Great one is Steelyard Commons, right, where the developer built, but the developer did build through there a part of the towpath trail, which is an important public connection,
Yeah.
right? And so if you look at a site like this, the ability to access a variety of points throughout there through a variety of trails. Now, there are ways that you can go out and raise those dollars via grants and other things, but there are ways to build into the cost of the development and just ensure that the developer is going to bear those costs and have public access. But you're leasing some of these into private spaces, and the RV park is a great example. And
Oh, hang on, I'm sorry. Chair, I have to interrupt. I've got to take tight control of my time. I have to be somewhere very, very soon. I understand that there are lots of decisions left to be made, and we can draw 1,000 paths from the point that we're at. We can always draw 1,000 paths from the point that we're at. But the fact of the matter is, when we take one step at a time, we're going to close those paths off. And so closing down Burke shuts down a whole path, right? Through the chair, is there any reason that we can't have a golf course there right now on the land that is being occupied by the port if the port were to vacate?
Yeah, to the councilman through the chair, there's a couple constraints of having both the port, of having the airport. I was going to say port, but I realized that was confusing. The airport on the site. So, I've seen some drawings that kind of put a 9-hole golf course in this very kind of northeast corner. Maybe that's feasible, but I don't know if that gets to like the financeable portion of this question.
So through the chair, it's funny because I was at a public meeting, my ward meeting the other week, last week or whenever, and somebody brought this. This is the Campbell administration. I'm gonna lay this out so that people can take a look at it. This is the Campbell administration's plan for lakefront development, which is pretty cool. It includes an 18-hole golf course just northeast of the airport, and the airport stays put,
This is one,
right?
yeah.
And people have said that we've had plans for the lakefront for hundreds of years. We have, right? We've had dozens of plans. This is the Campbell administration. It's got the Cheers, the new islands out here, right? Wendy Park is not quite beach volleyball, but I guess my question is this: if this is available to us right now, and we can develop this while keeping the Burke, why wouldn't we want to look at the potential to develop the area north and east of Burke now, right? And see how it goes before making a decision, or we would be able to. We have an option to make a decision later on Burke and still develop this land right here. And through the chair, have you all looked at this about like doing something with northeast while keeping Burke?
To the councilman through the chair, I think one of the challenges with that golf course specifically is it does not account for that CDF 9. And so trying to maintain our port operations on the site is in direct conflict with what that specific plan is. We are really focused on all 450 acres and allowing for public access of that site. It is incredibly challenging to work with the FAA to co-locate operations with the FAA.
Yeah.
So there is
They seem
also
to think
a
they
cost
could do it a couple of
benefit.
years ago.
I don't know that was I wasn't there for this
And-
plan, and I don't know that this was I don't know if this was.
And the
ideas
chief
on
planning
paper or-
director of this is now the county executive, right? So I think that he's got a little bit of know-how when it comes to like these types of things. I'll leave this here, but if you could give it back to Councilwoman Hudson, thank you for bringing it in.
That's great.
I'll leave this here for people to look at because I have to get moving. But I guess my last question is going to be, or no, that I don't have any more questions, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, that was it. I just want to ask if we can consider more about what our potential is to redevelop Burke without having to close down Burke. That's my closing thought to leave on.
Thank you. Moving to Councilwoman Gray, followed by Councilman Shaw.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just have a few questions on the point you made with certain of these diagrams and pictures that you went through of the concept of the Burke Lakefront. The first concept that you viewed was the land description of is that viewpoint for the helicopters, for the medical helicopters to stay. Would this be your concept to replace Signature?
To the councilwoman through the
Chair, to the team.
To the councilwoman through the chair, we've been having ongoing conversations with Signature about their various operations. It seems like the better path for them would be to relocate into Hopkins, although we've also talked to them about having medical transport or helicopter operations at both Hopkins and at Burke Lakefront Airport.
Okay, because knowing that when the gentleman came to the table last time of the committee chair to the team, he did speak on the fact that they were not offered extended contracts because I know when I did my tour, everyone there had wanted to stay, but they said they would not offer extended contracts. And due to the fact that you have now listened to a lot of the feedback, comments that this medical service is needed due to timing of organs that need to be brought in and then get to the hospitals at a certain time per se. So now you decided to implement your own medical helicopters to replace Signature that's already there, but to move them to Hopkins Airport. So why would you bring your own when we already have one there? This is hypothetically, because now I know everything is hypothetically discussed right now, so I'm just asking a hypothetical question per se.
Yeah,
Chair to anyone on the team.
to the councilwoman through the chair, we've been having a lot of conversations with Cleveland Clinic, Signature, all of the operators. The way that their business operation works is that they typically have what they call fixed wing operations, so a small plane that will transport organs or people. And so they rely on some sort of runway infrastructure, and then they will kind of use the helicopter as the last couple mile solution, or sometimes they'll fly what's actually more common is that they'll fly the fixed wing and just put the organ in an ambulance and take it to a hospital. So if there was to be this is meant to either supplement or be in addition to maintaining that fixed wing operations at Hopkins. We've had a lot of detailed conversations with them about how we would be able to operationalize that at Cleveland Hopkins, which is not atypical. Most cities kind of use their main airport for all of their medical transport as well. So the vertiport is an example of how to, be additive with whatever Signature would need to do, as well as other folks in the market. You might even currently there's like a sightseeing helicopter tour at Berkeley Lakefront Airport. Maybe that's something that would want to continue operating from this site, even if the airport was to close. But if we were to keep a runway on the site, it would have to be at least 5,000 feet, and then we're not able to develop, anything that we're showing here.
Okay, all right. Even so, when you are creating your own airport, how much feet would these helicopters need to have even to come into the landing? Since Signature would need 5,000 feet, what is the shortest of this particular helicopter, to bring in the organs? So what's the difference of the feet
Magnitude.
per se?
Yeah, to the councilwoman through the chair, the vertiport that's shown here is about, I want to say 1.5 to 2 acres. 1.5 acres, I was right in the middle. And so what this would allow for, that's more than enough space to land a helicopter. This would also allow for like helicopter storage, refueling, maintenance, in addition to it taking off. I mean, helicopters can take off and land in a really small space. This vertiport that we're showing, again, is just a concept, but it would also support that like refueling and maintenance of helicopters.
Okay, since we're talking hypothetically.
Yeah.
I'm just, reviewing what you brought to the table. So the second question is the future of the Cleveland Air Show, which is huge for the city. So now you're saying that, Chair, to the team, if Berkeley closes, the airport could potentially remain remote where? On what site, hypothetically, Chair, to the team?
Thank you to the councilman through the chair. So a couple just points for around the air show. Except for one type of plane that only comes once every 3 years, all of the planes that we look at in the sky in the air show take off and land at Hopkins currently. So Burke right now is used for static display and for selling tickets to view it.
Okay.
Right. So what we're thinking, and again we've been trying and are eager to engage with the air show on this to have this conversation, is that if you look at the sports fields on this plan as an example, it is quite easy to imagine fencing those off for a weekend, for Labor Day weekend. So the air show can still have a ticketed viewer experience. You can still go to Burke, pay $50 for a ticket, pay $50 to park, and go in to actually watch the air show. But it is really, really common. Air shows in almost every other city that I'm aware of don't generally have that static display. There are often places to purchase tickets to view the show, but most of them, including for the most part the Cleveland Air Show, does actually operate remotely.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so this hypothetically viewing area, would that be the area that the Cleveland residents would be using if they want to view the air show? If it's located somewhere else, if this is the hypothetical area?
So hypothetically, it could be. This is the air show. We have not met with them yet, so we are eager to sit down to meet with them to see if this makes sense, if it needs to be smaller, how to continue maintaining the air show and maintaining a ticketed experience to the air show, while also being able to use Burke the other 362 days a year.
Yeah, and I might add, this viewing area is showing what could be sort of fenced off and have paid tickets. All of Cleveland is a viewing area during the air show, certainly, parking lots all around the lakefront. And so that would continue to be the case where, people could watch the air show from, any given point, whether it's Voinovich or it's North Coast Yard or Edgewater, their backyard in my case, could watch the air show.
Because I see it from my neighborhood. I didn't come down. I see it from
Exactly.
the bridge of 93rd Bridge. So
And that would still be the case.
So I let
Yep.
you know that much. Yeah. So my last question. I know a lot of my colleagues had already asked questions per se, so I'm not going to be redundant. But my last question, Chair, to the team, you said that one of your meetings, you have several wards that you've been in and you're going to come in. Now, I have Ward 3 now. Now, Ward 3 is on here saying that you've been there. Where were you at in Ward 3 without my knowledge, if you were already there and or if you planned to come? Because the last meeting I said that I would like you to come to one of my community meetings, and they just started last month. This is the second month, so where in Ward 3 were you at? And I wasn't there in that meeting to tell the other residents to be at that meeting, because the residents that I know, if they have taken the survey online, that's all good, but I wasn't present at a meeting in Ward 3 when you were there to know that you were there. I just want to support my colleague, Councilor Jones, because I know you, because at the last meeting, you said you was going to be doing a survey, and I said you're going to be out in the community. I wasn't contacted to know where you would be in Ward 3. So, Chair, to the team, where were you in Ward 3?
So to the councilman through the chair, so a couple things. One, just as a follow-up to this, we talked with Councilman Jones about sharing some of that data. That's actually broken down by ward as well, so I'm happy to share with you specifically what folks in Ward 3 are saying, and likewise, Councilman, for your ward. I can get you the name of the specific neighborhood block club that we attended for Ward 3. It was someone from my team who attended that one, so not myself individually. And then moving forward, we've sent through Land Studio, I think 3 or 4 emails to every member of this body to try to facilitate more of those meetings. And then they've also reached out to CDCs, leaders of neighborhood block clubs all around the city. So we're working through both council members as well as sort of the existing meetings and networks. As a follow-up, right after this, I will send you an email directly, and we can try to coordinate a time for your next community meeting to make sure that we're going out there.
All right, and I'm going to say this. I appreciate you going to the block clubs,
Yeah.
but those are block clubs,
Correct.
smaller block club meetings for residents that be at their neighborhood block clubs. The community ward meetings are bigger than the block clubs. They're a smaller group of residents that have that block club in their neighborhood. That doesn't oversee the community ward meeting that we try to push out so everyone can be there around the entire community, even though they don't show up. We appreciate the community block clubs, We appreciate the CDCs, but only a handful of folks be at the block clubs and the CDCs, and it doesn't get out to the mass of residents that be at the ward community meeting. So that's what my colleague Joe Jones was leaning to, is that the community ward meetings head the ward. The block clubs are the smaller groups of meetings, and the CDC have neighborhood meetings. So that is the statute of what the council tried to put out, so we can all work together.
And
So
Mr. Chairman,
saying the lease is, give me a second, Joe Jones, I know you want to jump in this, because it's a good one. You want to add on to it. So just to say the lease, please send me something, because we now having our monthly meetings now every month, and I have two. I have one in Salvage Village, and I have one in the Buckeye area, because I stretch from Cleveland Shaker to Salvage Village. And also in the areas of, as one of my constituents is my good friend Chief McNair. He knows this too. So we have plenty other meetings in the Cleveland Shaker area that I would like for you to attend, because everyone don't come to everyone's meeting. So please, we need to connect so you guys can come over to the Cleveland Shaker area of some of those meetings versus my meeting versus other meetings too. I'm on board. So just to say that, we need to have a connection, because this is a huge decision for all residents to understand what is going on with Burke Lakefront. A lot of people probably go down there that I'm not aware of, and they have not even touched this at all. But just to keep this door open for them to know what's going on, at least they have a voice and they know what's happening, and then they have a say-so if they don't want to say anything at all. So respectfully, that's everything supposed to go through the council. So I respect what all councils are saying. We can get this out to everyone if you don't know where to connect to. And my last thing I want to say is, I know change is coming. I'm all about change. I'm all about letting go. I'm not about being stuck, because we know change have to come to every major city. I go to major cities and see their beautiful lakefront, and I be from one end to the next. I have not seen these things, the beautification that these other cities have given their cities on their riverfront. But I have walked there lakefront, from the urban community back to the riverfront, all the way back to the other side. And it's astounding to see these other cities have let go and to move forward. I'm just saying this, I have grandsons, I have grandkids. I don't want my grandkids to have what I had 50 years ago. They're supposed to have better. I don't want to have my great-grandkids and my great-grandkids to have what I had 50 years ago. I'm going to be the ancestors of my grandkids, great-grandkids, and moving forward. I want them to have more than what I have. I want them to enjoy the future of what they should have different than what I enjoy. I don't want them to be stuck in my age era, to say I got the same thing my nana had. I don't want them to live that way. We have to move on. But sometimes we have gotten so complacent of what we already have. Is it working anymore? No, it's not working. I'm the council. I'm not against mobility. I'm not going to be here forever, but I want my grandkids and my great-grandkids to have more than what I had to enjoy in my time. So change is evident. We can't stop that. So a lot of things here is going to happen, whether we like it or not, but we just need to understand the process of how it will happen, to know that Cleveland have to grow and be viable like other cities. These other mayors probably got their butt kicked left and right for the change of what they brought to their cities. And they had to replace things that we got stuck on, that they had to fight to move forward to change these things. I understand it in my mindset because I might be down there in my wheelchair on the lakefront having fun. So it's just to say the least. I am not against change. It's just putting the information out there correctly to know that we have to start changing the infrastructure to bring more people into in our city, because that's why we got redistrict. We lost 2 wards, and we're hoping to get those 2 wards back in another 5 years or so, if we can build our population, but be a more of an attractive city in order for people who want to come and live in our city. So I'm just going to say that we just got to work on this better and harder and get it out to the community. Just letting go is really hard for the city, for the Clevelanders and stuff. But some things probably will remain, but in the midst of it, some things has to change along the way, so we can make sure that our kids have more than what we have already have, so they can continue to build in the city of Cleveland. So I'm done, Chair. That's my.
Thank you, Councilman Gray, and Councilman Jones with a 30-second follow-up.
Quickly, you know, she brought out a really good point. So for the administration, like moving forward, make sure you get in contact with the council people. Previously, there's been circumventing the process and going to side groups and organizations. You should always, if you're going to make presentations in a respective neighborhood, you should contact the council person so that you can work through them to make sure that all of the citizens, not just a handful, but everyone has an opportunity to voice their perspectives and opinions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it, and to the councilwoman and councilman through the chair. One, needs your help and partnership on that, so eager to work with you. We'll make sure our team forwards the emails so they're back at the top of your inbox, so we can start to coordinate all of this. And we're reaching out to everyone: neighborhood block clubs, larger community meetings. We want to do all of them. They facilitate sort of different outcomes. And at these meetings, just to prepare you, it's less of a formal presentation like this and more of a, here's a bunch of surveys, here's what we're working on, we'd like your feedback on it. But let's connect after this and we can put that together.
Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you for your time, everyone here from the administration. I'll just dive in real quick. I know I'm not a regular member of the committee, so I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the team in this approach. I specifically came to the meeting today just to kind of learn a little bit more and talk about, I think, an aspect of the conversation that I felt like has been missing, and that's regarding housing. I wanted to go to, I think it's slide 9 on the presentation. That talks about the ESI study, correct? I wanted to hear a little bit more about what that maximum development plan that includes 1,200 units of residential units, what does that look like? And I know earlier during Councilman Harsh's line of questioning, you talked a little bit about further environmental studies being done. So is housing feasible on this site? Wanted to hear more thoughts about that from the team.
Through the chair to Councilman Shaw, I'll kick this off, and I believe Scott can fill in some of this too. We looked at a lot of different scenarios in that early study on this. One of those was a maximum development scenario. I think important to remind, one, there are real constructability issues if you want to start going more vertical on that site. That goes on. I think also, as Councilman Slife has pointed out in a variety of these things, there are substantial costs to start to get to that point. The city would have to start paying for infrastructure related to roadways, sewer, lighting, like all of those sorts of things, which are going to drive substantial costs to that development site. Which is frankly, I think, as we began to look at it, the complementary sides of what can be our lakefront on Burke Lakefront Airport, as opposed to our lakefront that is much more connected to our grid downtown, where current Cleveland Browns Stadium is, right? And how these things can work together. I'll hold there and I'll ask Scott to fill in.
I might, before we get to Scott, one thing too, I just want to mention, because we talked about this at our very first Burke meeting, the land there it's submerged land, and so we have a submerged land lease. What that means is that parceling it off and selling property would be really challenging. And so a big single family housing type typology or like that more sort of traditional neighborhood typology would, from a legal and regulatory framework, be really challenging. What's less challenging is like the multifamily, you know, how apartment buildings. That's more of a market question that I think Tom and Scott will continue talking about.
And there, one thing, I touched on this a while ago earlier, but I did just want to add, I think from a market standpoint of what we can continue to absorb from residential in the city is fairly challenging, right? There's a lot of development that is occurring right now. I think between the riverfront and on down to the lakefront, I think that there's a growth trajectory that over the course of the next 10 to 20 years can absorb some units, but there was talk earlier about the city participating in economic development deals. We were dead
Hey,
last
Chief,
out of every major city.
Could you pull your microphone closer
Sorry.
to you? Thank
We
you.
were dead last out of every major city in the country in terms of apartment starts. There's a lot of reasons for that. There are a lot of reasons that we offer residential tax abatement, and that is because we don't have the market that has that, you know, that level of demand for folks that are coming in here. So to add an additional 1,200 units on top of the work that is already happening in other parts of downtown, parts of the city, would take a substantial influx of residents.
And to the councilman through the chair, to add on that a couple of the points a little bit. So one, we talked a little bit earlier about feasibility of the site. I think the first meeting way back in January, February, we talked about the site conditions. So there are, when it comes to environmental remediation, the question is always, what are you building, right? The remediation required for walking trails or competitive youth sports facilities is different than the remediation required for a home that has a sewer line going through it, and all of these things with tap water that people are drinking. Additionally, from a geotechnical perspective, like soil conditions impact what you can build and at what cost. So the soil conditions here are actually surprisingly good when you have to build a runway on something that an airplane lands on. Those soils have to be compact enough to handle some sort of low density development. I mean, the terminal is sort of an example of that right now. But any substantial vertical development that you're putting more than just sort of wood frame or slab on grade will be cost prohibitive, both from an infrastructure perspective to the city, as well as to the financeability of an actual transaction, at least right now. So that's one. Two, and Jessica and Tom mentioned sort of home ownership or single family opportunities. With the submerged land, while multifamily is possible, we can never actually sell the land. And if you think about why folks want to purchase and own a home, it's to hold it for long periods of time, to ideally give it to your children and grandchildren, and you cannot do that on a land lease. So if there were to be housing here, it would have to be rental, most likely. Third, and Tom alluded to this as well, from a housing perspective, looking across the broader market, or even just I'll call it the broader North Coast market, thinking about Burke and the stadium site simultaneously, and in context of each other, allows us to think about increased density on the stadium site. We want to balance public space and dense private investment. If we are building large-scale public spaces on Burke, that probably allows us to think about sort of more dense housing-specific development on the stadium site as well. So that's sort of a component of this too. And then the last thing I'll talk about is sort of absorption and phasing. Tom's exactly right. We don't have the market right now to build 1,000 units of housing on this site. We don't have the market to absorb it. But as we think about, and I'll start with sort of the bedrock work that's happening right now and in the next several years, moving into the stadium site development that's happening shortly after that, moving into Burke that could be happening after that, you're starting to look at an absorption timeline over 20 years. And from that perspective, we can build a market that can absorb more of that housing stock. Then the last thing I'll mention, and we touched on this briefly, very briefly early in the presentation, but probably didn't talk about it enough, is the way that we're thinking about laying out this site is leaving room for future phases that could be more dense housing when we have a market for it, when we have demand for it, and when we have infrastructure that could absorb it. So you look at sort of the version of a plan that has a large public park on it, or even the golf course one. If in 10 to 15 years, our population has grown significantly, and there's a lot of demand for new housing. We don't have the sort of land mass in other parts of the city to absorb that. We can cut off a couple acres of a green space or of a golf course, or really of any of the uses, and think about converting that to something that is more dense and sort of more housing focused. So while I don't think it makes sense to answer your question in a very long-winded way, but try to get direct, I don't think it makes sense now, but we are setting the table for that to be something that could happen in the future.
I don't know if you had anything. Okay. We were going down the line, so I didn't want to exclude you. Okay. Thank you for that response, and that helps. And I hear your concerns about what the market can absorb, and my question, once again, right, goes back to what do the people actually need? And that's a different question and a reality than what the market and developers are willing to do. And for me, at least right now, this is such a huge opportunity. And I'll be frank, I'm in favor of closing the airport for whatever that's worth, even though I'm not a member of the committee. As a council member, for me, we've talked about developing the lakefront for decades, right, in this city. This is such a huge opportunity, and we have ownership of this public land, and how do we utilize and take this opportunity? I frankly do not care about the airport users right now. It's rich people that haven't really cared about our neighborhoods, and for me, frankly, the air show, as well as this military air show, that in the midst of a war where we're bombing innocent people, this is not the military propaganda that I'm willing to push in our city. But then it is hard for me, at the same time being in favor of closing the airport, to get behind a vision when there isn't really a vision of what this would look like. And I understand there's barriers and there's multiple pathways, but there is no clarity on what the administration wants to do with this next. And I know that requires council buy-in, and you want to move at the speed of trust is what I'm hearing. But for me, what I'm looking for the administration from in terms of being willing to commit support is what's the vision here? I know there's big risks, and when we talk about what the market can absorb or what we can't, that doesn't erase the fact that there is an urgent and desperate need for affordable housing in our city. Whether that looks like ownership or whether that looks like multifamily unit, I don't think people care. The need is there. So for me, it's what is the city, what is the administration doing about this? And the lack of conversations about centering that need for people, and how are we going to utilize this 450 acres to fulfill that immediate and urgent need, not 10 years down the line, not 15, right? And I heard Councilman Plensick earlier just talk about how much trouble there is downtown because of these closures, building foreclosures. There's no affordable housing downtown. That's part of the reason why people don't want to stay there, and you're not getting more people who are willing to spend their time there, because we're dependent on the suburban flow of people to come in, spend their money, and leave. But there's no opportunities for families to stay there. There's no opportunity for children to be raised in this area. And I'm just shocked that this isn't more of a conversation of like, okay, what does it look like? Whether that's on the stadium site, which can sustain more of that, versus the other parts of it. And so all that to say is that for me, it is difficult to kind of full-throatedly support disclosure or get behind it when I do not see the types of needs being fulfilled that our people actually need. And we already know that the developers and the market will be chomping at the bit to get this into private hands. And once again, for me, the public-private partnerships, I know Director McNairn, I've talked about that at length, that it's public losses but private profits. And we keep seeing that happen again and again. And a lot of the arguments I keep hearing about this was the same arguments we heard when the county was developing the convention center, right? About how it's going to attract people to come here. And my question, once again, keeps coming back to, who are we building this for? Is it for the people that already live here, the residents of this city? Or are we fantasizing and thinking about some imaginary set of people that will move here because of these amenities? And frankly, the people of Cleveland aren't looking for more amenities. They're looking for housing and food access. We heard this time and time again. So that's what I offer. And I understand I'm not looking for a clear response here right now, but for me at least, this lack of commitment and vision for what our city needs is frustrating.
Sure. To the council, through the chair, I appreciate all of that and completely understand and hear where you're coming from. I can't speak on behalf of the city. I run sort of independent 501c3, but when I think about vision, I actually don't think about two separate sites. I think about the stadium site and Burke Airport, if we're successful in doing all these things, as just Cleveland's lakefront, right? In the future, they will not be considered separate. So I do think about the development on Burke in context of what we can do on the stadium site. And we are, and Jason talked about this earlier, and if you want to add anything, please go for it. We are in the process of sort of a new site plan, master plan for that stadium site right now. It kicked off like last week. are taking all of the community input that we've had over the last 3 years for that site to sort of put something on paper. Housing will be a major component of that. There will be affordability requirements as part of that, as part of a community benefits agreement that'll be included in there. I expect sometime mid to late summer, we'll be able to have a site plan for that site that we're ready to share with you all, as well as with the general public, to solicit additional input and feedback, and look forward to continuing the housing conversation specifically.
Yeah, and Scott, to the councilman through the chair, Scott hit on a number of things, especially the affordability piece in terms of having that requirement with the stadium site, and we are working with our new master planner to design that. But I think a big piece of what we're talking about here too, is you mentioned, it's what does the community, the residents of the city of Cleveland need today, right? And so part of that is, as we're looking at Berkeley Lakefront Airport and looking at the different concepts, is what additional revenue can we drive out of that so that the city can provide more to the residents of the services that they're truly looking for and desiring, right? So like, how do we get more out of this public asset that we have that is Berkeley Lakefront?
So, and I was through the chairman and Councilman Shaw. One, I greatly appreciate that question, and you and I started a really great conversation the other day, and one that I look forward to continuing. And part of which I started off with you, as I do with many people. We don't actually have an affordable housing problem in Cleveland. We have an income problem. And there's a lot of people that, it's hard for them to fathom, right, the challenges that we face of providing housing at the price point our residents need when the cost of construction what they are, right? Like, you look at the average...
You said we have a what problem?
An income problem, right?
Poverty.
Yes, poverty, yes, absolutely. And that is one of the reasons that we are so focused on job growth as an administration, bringing high-quality jobs the average Clevelander can get access to provide better quality housing. Because, again, when you look at the challenges that we face of providing truly affordable housing to the average Clevelander, right? So even if you do a quote-unquote affordable housing deal, often in Cleveland, where you do a 60% low-income housing tax credit, oftentimes you're talking about getting rents that are like $1,200 to $1,500 a unit, right? You open that up in the ward Councilwoman Gray and I live in, that is the most expensive housing in the ward, right? We have worked so hard. I remember Councilwoman Santana working on a project with her that's a great project, Blanket Mills, that's going on, which is a low-income housing tax credit. But we had to use millions of dollars of ARPA dollars, other things, to write that down. We basically created privatized public housing
Just to be
make
clear,
it approachable.
and I don't mean to cut you off, just so we're on the same page. For me, when I'm talking about affordable housing, I do mean public housing.
Yes.
That's, to me, what the
100%.
gold standard is. We've seen the federal and state government continue their disinvestment in this.
Correct.
And this is also, once more, for me, more of an argument why the city should be investing in these things.
Yes.
Because we know that the federal and state government are refusing to do that, but that doesn't mean our people don't need it.
Yes. Understood. And the last thing I'll say about that is I want you to know that we're working incredibly hard on a housing strategy, right, that we are looking forward to come up with. We do have, again, fundamental financial problem of how we get to the level of need in this city to deliver housing at the price point that works for all Clevelanders.
I hear, and
It
I
is-
know
it is
every,
one of
this
our
is,
biggest
I'm sure you've heard
challenges.
variations of this, right? Every time we go to look to build housing or provide food access, the question always becomes, where is the money coming from? But when we're spending money for the police or any other number of things, there's always money for that. And that's, to me, the question that I struggle with, because I disagree. I think we have to have a reprioritization of where we're spending our money. I mean, just earlier this year, we authorized $27 million in overtime just for the police. And I think about when the question, right, I asked earlier at the council meeting on Monday, how much is enough? And it's coming at the cost of our neighborhoods and housing, food access, a number of things. So for me, that is a reprioritization that I'm looking from the administration. And I believe this asset and opportunity is a great way for the administration to signal where their priorities are. And I hope we get to see more of that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hudson had to leave, but she asked me to share that she was anticipating Land Studios' presence at a community meeting last night, and they did not arrive. So if you could reach out to that, Councilman Casey, and then we have 3 individuals who have signed up for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to actually Councilman Shaw, I think what you just heard was, yeah, we need affordable housing, but not at Burke. And then to follow up on more of Councilman Shaw's point was, what are we building for
the residents who are here. The whole presentation was about how we can get people here. In your own admittance, you've even said destination spot here, destination spot there, destination spot there. And what is it, aside from a 10-mile walking trail, that would actually bring our residents here? When in our own neighborhoods, and I'm not pitting one against the other, we're closing ball fields, right? We can't get kids out to utilize baseball fields anymore. Tom, you know that, right? We've got Little League Baseball that have to start combining. Near West Dennison, Old Brooklyn, they're all combining because there's not enough kids to play. And here we want to build something that's going to bring people to the city, as opposed to what we keep saying is we need to open up access to the lakefront for our residents, and yet we're building RV parks. And how many people in the city of Cleveland actually own an RV? So it is a destination spot that you want to build. It's not something for the current residents, although they'll have access to it, so we say. But the main aspect of what you've presented today, and I know that it's not a finalized thing today, but we don't see how the average individual Clevelander would come down here except to take a 10-mile walk. And to get here, to your point, they have to drive, right? So it's not like somebody from the east side or the west side are going to walk to Burke Lakefront Airport to take a 10-mile walk on a trail or a golf course, right? I mean, I'm not a golfer, so I don't get it. But during budget, we hear how important Highland is, right? And how we have to invest in Highland. And then we want to turn around and you want to build something to compete with that. So I understand the idea, but I'm not putting the two and two together. And then, Mr. Chairman, to Chief Trevisano, did I hear you correctly that you said the Greedy Corporate Partnership is in Washington advocating for the closure of Burke?
To the councilman through the chair, they've indicated to us that when they haven't done specific Burke trips, but when they're in Washington talking to congressional delegates.
And we know their history of how well that they like to take care of the city of Cleveland, but that's a whole nother conversation and topic that we can have. That's about. Did you want to respond?
To the councilman through the chair, I'll let Tom sort of talk about the sports market in a second, but just to address a couple of the points you made, I think Jessica mentions earlier, if we came to you saying we wanted to build a 450-acre public park that was open to everyone all the time, we would have no apparatus to fund that, right? Both upfront construction and operations and maintenance over time. So all of these uses are trying to find that balance of how do we figure out how to privately finance some of these things while opening it up to access. So I'd add in addition to 10 miles of walking trails, one of the plans does have a 180-acre public park as a large piece of that, which would be open to the general public. We're actively working with some of the other uses to ensure that Clevelanders can sort of access those spaces as well. And then Jessica pulled up sort of some of the community engagement data that we've got. Sports and recreation, trails, open park space are what people are saying that they want as well. So I completely agree.
Mr. Chairman, to Scott.
Yeah.
In your surveys, are these coming from Clevelanders?
Yeah, we can share the full breakdown with you. They're both Clevelanders and non-Clevelanders.
Can you do that? Can you do that for me?
Yeah.
For us? I think one of the bigger questions that we all have to step back and ask ourselves is 450 acres, by everybody's admittance, is huge, right?
Yep.
Are we getting in over our heads? Right? I mean, are we taking too much on at one time? You got 30 acres that you're going to have to develop when GCP helped that team move out of the city of Cleveland. And now you're going to take on, so you're looking at almost 500 acres. That's got to be the size of small cities, right? It's got to be the size of North Olmsted, probably, right?
To the council through the chair, it's half of downtown Cleveland.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but I do think as we're looking at developing this, not all of this is happening in the next year.
I get that,
Yeah.
but I think one of my fears is that the administration and Congress is going to put something on the plate of the council that we'll be able to handle, but we're going to be backed into a corner, right? We're going to wake up one day and your GCP and the administration is going to come to us and say, hey, guess what? Congress said we could close the airport. And then it's going to fall on us. And then the administration is going to have a pipe dream plan that's going to take 50 years to develop, because we know that it's not going to happen, in 4 years or 3 years. It's just geographically too big to handle. Then what do we do, right? And then I'm looking forward to hearing actually from the air show. I understand that the administration can say they can do it, but can't apply ability, but will they do it, right? So that's a whole nother. So I wanted to put that out there, that it all sounds good, right? But so does me being 6'5" and playing in the NBA. That sounds really good, but I'm not 6'5" and I don't have the athletic ability to play in the NBA. So I just want to put that out there, that I really hope we're not getting everybody's hopes up to, this is going to close, and then all of a sudden we're going to have a whole new city of Cleveland on the lakefront, which people don't even have access to the lake, right? At Burke, it's not like we're building a beach where, you're going to have access to get into the water like you do at Euclid Beach or Edgewater or anything like that. We're just allowing you to get closer to the water is what we're really doing here. That's opening up the lakefront, is just allowing people to get closer to the water when you've got, I don't think I've ever seen the police down to control Voinovich Park for overpopulation. So I just want to keep in mind that our eyes bigger than our stomachs, right? Are we biting off more than we can chew? Are we ordering more than we're going to actually be able to eat? So that's just my 2 cents on it for right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So,
Thank you. Go ahead, Chief.
Through Chair, Councilman, I just want to say one, I genuinely appreciate that question of like, what is in it for Cleveland residents? And, I know Councilman Shaw touched on this a little bit ago too, but I'm nearly 50 years old, right? I'm a middle-aged, middle-class white guy. I did not grow up rich. I certainly didn't grow up poor, right? Like, full admission, I don't know what it's like to want for a need. And yet, I have never taken one plane ride on Burke Lakefront Airport, right? I know one time I was traveling on a trip. For the past nearly 20 years, I've worked for nonprofits and now for government. It was a group traveling to Philadelphia, and the idea came up that we would charter this plane, and the cost that was given to me was so staggering that I just thought, I don't know how people do that, but not for me. Right, so what I do know is that right now that there's 450 acres that almost no average Clevelander has anything to do with that goes on there. I think that it was articulated earlier, and Scott brought up, it is almost shocking the lack of actual access to, whether it's just to, whether maybe sitting in your city council room you have actually better view shed. This is why I say it's like we are the city that can barely see and does not touch our water, and we've got Edgewater Beach. We've got the Nature Front Preserve. There is shockingly little access. It's almost impossible to go actually have a bite to eat and look at the water, right? I'm an East Side City resident. I can't wait for the Parker Sailing Center to open, because there'll be a little new restaurant in there, because we used to go down to that little spot. Metro Parks goes a decent amount just to be able to sit and look at the water. My kids are like, holy crap, we're here. 30% of the people who respond to these comments don't even consider Cleveland to be a waterfront city. That is wild to me, right? And so what is in it for average Clevelanders, unequivocally in every scenario of which we're talking out here? There is real access to the site. And I think Councilman Plensik, you said this earlier about, downtown, what's in it for the east side? This place goes from downtown to East 55th Street, right? Which almost immediately gets you to Cheers, right? Which is a $300 million investment over the course of time, redefining our lakeshore there. There are so many East Side neighborhoods that will have access to this through a variety of ways that you can just get out and open. And by the way, we still do need real open space in this city, high quality green spaces where people can get out and actually have a safe place where you can just kind of breathe in the water and check it out. You're unequivocally getting that. And Councilman Jones, you hit on this earlier. We have an opportunity here to bring in real revenue, which supports everything that you do. Everything, right? Because today, the tax revenues generated by Burke Lakefront Airport, both direct and indirect, are almost insignificant. We know that we can replace almost all of the indirect, right? It produces almost no direct, right? And so what we are getting for average Clevelanders is both access to our waterfront that does not exist today. And again, it's almost embarrassing how little of our waterfront is actually accessible for Clevelanders to get to. And we're getting opportunity to generate revenue that can do things like fix potholes, pave streets, right? And yes, we have to figure out a way to create more affordable housing. And look, we talk about this all the time, but that'll cost real money. You could take the $21 million saved by police, and I'm not commenting on what's the right way to go there, but you could take that and you would maybe get 2 new affordable housing buildings out of that. 27. Right, 27 million. But again, you took $13 million a piece, and you were able to get 2 LIHTC deals a part of that, and you put that extra 13, you're maybe getting 2 new affordable housing deals out of that. So our problem is significantly larger than that, right? And please understand that, like, we're thinking about that every day. That is a priority for this administration. I know it's a priority for you. It's like, I feel like I come down here all the time. We talk about like housing issues, and it's like you would need infinity money to do the things that we want to do. And so we got to start somewhere. But that is what is in this for average Clevelanders, right? Direct public lakefront access, opportunity to create revenue.
Mr. Chairman, to the director, you got a job to do. You're doing a good job selling it. My last question is, to Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Rossano, in this plan that you have today, or even to Scott, is there a cost to the general fund?
To the councilman through the chair, that we don't anticipate, it's a $600 million kind of overall construction cost, that most of it is privately financeable.
Most of it.
The things that I don't have an answer to is
Right.
like, I think there's maybe $20 million of like roads, utilities, that would be CPP that we would be putting, the utility extensions. I don't yet know if that would be borne by the developer. That would be the goal, is for that to be borne by developers as opposed to by the city of Cleveland.
But Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Rossano, or to Chief, I'm sorry.
That's good.
There could potentially be a cost to the general fund if Burke goes away, when there is no cost to the general fund currently with Burke being here.
It's not something that I have a known answer to, but there is no, we've already talked about Burke
Right.
is subsidized by Cleveland Hopkins Airport. This
Right.
does not have a, user that would subsidize beyond, the developers that would help develop the site.
But I just want to reiterate is that Burke currently is not a financial burden to the city of Cleveland, right? We spend no general fund, no tax dollars, no anything on Burke Lakefront Airport. Currently, today, we know that. It's an enterprise fund. We understand it. It's subsidized by the airlines. But closing Burke could potentially be a cost to the general fund. Eventually, maybe down the road, whatever, could be a potential cost to the general fund, correct? All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 public commenters signed up. When I call your name, if you could seat to the right side of Mr. Russell here, and there'll be a microphone. You'll each have 3 minutes. I'll keep your time. The first is Tim Lewis from Akron, if you're able to come and sit next to Mr. Russell. And once you get going.
Could you use that, could we have that map there so I could look at it and show it to people?
This isn't mine to give out. I think this was Councilman.
No, I mean, could it be spread out so I could? Okay.
Yes, sir.
One of the things I had in mind was.
I'm sorry, if you could, you need to speak into the microphone, though, even if
okay.
you hold it, so that people watching live
All
can
right.
hear you.
There's an area over here that I know you wanted to build outward somewhere probably between 55th and 72nd Street. And in addition to doing that, if you build an island out here, then the outer part of the island could protect the shoreline from storms, and the inner part of the island, I'd be right about here, would be a spot where we could relocate these 2 yacht clubs. And then after doing that, we could redo the land configuration, something like this. And then the trail could still go around the edges there. Another possibility would be to add a little land here and go like that and continue the bike and hike trail along there.
Sir, could you hold the microphone?
Would be, I'm sorry. Okay, so this could go over to here, a little land addition as well as what I'm suggesting there. Oh, and another question. Are they going to redo the end of the inner build so that it has more of a gentle curve rather than the sharp one they show over on some of these pictures?
I think there's been a number of plans from ODOT related to the inner belt. I can't say specifically where the state is on that.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, where you show East 18th going north and coming to this part of the Shoreway, west of Dead Man's Curve, is there any way that that might intersect that part of it, the part that's Route 2 only? Then east of that could be the interchange into the I-90, and then going west would be a couple intersections as you're proposing now. Although over by the stadium, if we just had a proposed intersection at West 3rd and East 9th, but not in that spot where that is just to the east of the stadium, if you could have that part, instead of going back into the Shoreway, could just go back into the North Marginal Road instead, have a turnaround there, as well as another one near the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You could have people dropped off and picked up for the museum as well as for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That is pretty much the ideas I wanted to discuss today.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis, and I'll ask that the team on the other side of the table speak with you afterwards and just share. I think there's going to be a number of opportunities moving forward for public comment on various aspects of lakefront development. So I think that they would be eager. I hope that they would be eager to take your ideas and analyze them. And I appreciate you coming today. Yes, thank you.
Did you say you had a quick question, Councilman Jones?
Yes. Looking at what we're seeing here on page 8, thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are going to be new streets that are going to be cut in where those arrows are located. I just want some clarification there. I do like the concept of access and cutting new streets in because we only have that one access. So is it East 12th Street? And then I see another arrow over here which says North Coast Connector all the way down the other end, more closer towards going towards the east side. Is that going to be an opening as well?
Correct. Yeah, to the councilman through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for your questions. This is showing the North Coast Connector, so that's the almost, it's the $487 million infrastructure project that includes the land bridge, but it also includes converting the Shoreway and adding multiple different, like you said, cuts into that Shoreway to better integrate our lakefront to our grid. So there will be improved connections at 3rd and 9th, and then additional connections at 18th. So folks will be able to basically get off the Shoreway at 18th or 17th and be able to kind of get into that portion of our downtown and east side through that. So we, as this project continues, we'll continue to look at ways to kind of cut into that to create a city grid.
Thank you for that. Is Dennis Turchek still here? I think that he left. And then finally, Mr. Houston.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council, and good afternoon, city. I don't know the proper term to use for you guys, but anyway, thank you for allowing me this opportunity. One of the things that's sticking out to me is that we have Huntington Beach all the way to Euclid Beach, right? We don't have any true development whatsoever on the beach line right now. Okay, I myself, like Ms. Gray, I travel a lot, travel out of the country, travel to different cities. And all we seem to have at our parks right now, undeveloped parks, right now, is sand, grass, and water, right? We have one ice cream parlor, and we have one, I believe, at Huntington Bank too, correct? We have no roller skate, roller things, any workout apparatuses, any park activities. We have no horseshoe pits or anything to offer the residents of the city of Cleveland. So it's kind of mind-boggling to a taxpayer, a person that has 3 different businesses within the city of Cleveland. I'm not a resident of the city of Cleveland, but I have 3 vital businesses that I've created for the community. And it's kind of frustrating to sit here and hear you guys discuss these type of things without residents' consent. I think we've got away from, it's the residents, it's the voters who determine what they want in their communities to be developed, okay? I am an investor, okay? I'm not a millionaire. I once was a millionaire, but I did make some great investments in my city with my money. And everything I've owned is, again, for the community. Group homes, car wash, tow truck service, which I just started because I'm waiting to get a contract with the city of Cleveland next year, because I noticed that we don't have any black tow truck companies in the city of Cleveland, okay? And I've also noticed that the tow truck companies that are here, if you look at their job right now, we have bumpers and we have debris on every city corner in the city of Cleveland. And I'm concerned about these things, right? I'm concerned that we're getting away from serving the people like we should be serving the people. Come ask the community what they desire. Come ask the children of these school systems, what are we missing? Because we're not paying attention. We're making a lot of decisions in this city based on big investors that don't live in the city of Cleveland, that don't live in the state of Ohio, okay? And I'm questioning, what is everyone thinking about that live in the city of Cleveland, that stays in this Calgary County? Are we really paying attention to building things to make it a better place for everyone? Or are we just sitting here getting caught up in white-collar crimes? Because a lot of this is falling up under white-collar crime, and I'm watching it, okay? And I'm going to connect the dots. A lot of these investors shouldn't be investing because it's unethical for them to do that when they're supporting other situations. I am truly a watchdog, and I am truly watching, and I will find and connect the dots to where all these different funds are going to these different corporations. This is where I figured out where the contracts and the money is being squandered, with all these different agencies coming in and receiving taxpayer dollars. And like Mr. Casey just said, we're gonna be on the hook in a minute. Only thing you guys see right now is putting a golf course down there. You're putting I believe you said a golf course, a sports arena, and hotels. That is not revenue for the city of Cleveland. Most people that golf are retired.
Mr. Houston.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, and if you all could also briefly speak with Mr. Houston if there's other opportunities for community engagement that maybe you haven't been aware of to this point, I think that'd be useful. With that, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank the administration throughout these 4 hearings. Again, we are not, there's no specific ask before this body. However, I think it is useful for us to understand this at a high level as further conversations happen. We do have some legislative items that we will need to get to between now and council recessing at the end of May. So look forward to, likely over the summer, some additional hearings related to Burke, including bringing in operators. However, there's also some immediately pending things, specifically RTA, that needs to come to the table. So just because something's not scheduled immediately doesn't mean it's not being scheduled. I'm just trying to triage everything before us. With that, I will close out this Committee on Transportation and Mobility. Thank you.